Thank you. Mr. President, it is now 11:45.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and begin our pre-commission meeting with a discussion of what's on the agenda. If any of the commissioners have any questions or comments about the agenda, now's the time to put them forward. I will mention that on item number 2 on the regular agenda, this is a continuation of the public hearing that we opened last week, but we will be deferring this to April 14th, date certain.
Mr. President,
Yes.
if I could, that would be item number 1 on the regular agenda.
I was gonna say, you could,
Well, then I'm leaving now.
you gotta wait till the first week of April to do that. I understand April Fool's Day is your birthday, too.
I really appreciate you announcing that, sir.
Okay. Wanted to put that on the record in case anything strange were to happen. Anyway, that's the only thing that I know of that's changed to our regular agenda. Anything from the commission? Anything from TV land? All right, then we'll go ahead and go right to the director's report.
Hopefully I have the correct one. Sir, Commissioners, a couple things to share with you today. First off, if you'll look in the auditorium forward here, you're going to see the beginning of the next transformation for your commission meeting. What we are going to be doing is adding this speaker's podium and 2 other desks to be in front of you, to move this to here. So when people come to address the commission or we have presentations, you're not having to do this and such. We will be speaking directly to you. There'll be a change in how the cameras are working so that everybody has full visibility of what's going on. But this has been in the works now for about a month and a half, and we hope to have the next piece here shortly. And then we'll have all the appropriate electronics set up so your presentations, everything else can be done center stage as opposed from over here back and forth. On the a couple things to share with you. First off, you're going to be seeing a request from Boise in the near future regarding somewhat of an expansion of the group that supports the Anne Frank Memorial Center operations. There's a new building that they're looking at. They are going to, they're working through Boise. They're a 501c and they'll work through us. They're going to be asking in the near future if the commission would be willing to provide a small piece of property that we have to support their expansion. Of course, the Anne Frank thing. Staff, yes, we would be very supportive of that. They are a 501c, and for the commission, again, we would also be entering into a license agreement regarding the air rights. Yes, we actually own the air and such, which I think is always amazing because that building will have a little bit of an overhang into the ACHD right-of-way. So our staff's already been looking at this. General counsel has gone through this top to bottom. We do have a government-to-government agreement with Boise, so that there is no exchange of funds, that sort of thing. But this is a very good project, and so we do expect to have this shortly. When we do, it'll be in front of you on a regular agenda item for you to take a look at and such. But I do have some of the charts, some of the maps they're looking at, and it's we'd be very happy to make that recommendation to you all to support it as we move forward.
Okay.
Commissioner Goldthorpe and Commissioner Hanson, and I think maybe Commissioner May, I'm not sure, but you may have recalled a couple of years ago we had a visit from the Forest Service. Commissioner?
I just remember the questions I asked.
Yes, sir. And in that lengthy discussion, there was a request from the Forest Service to open up local roadways, Harrison Boulevard, different things to allow logging trucks to bring down heavy loads on their way to the highway out to the mill going north. We had multiple presentations, and the staff and their staff finally agreed with Commissioner's support on the rules of engagement as to where, when, how, and what you will not go by. Schools, all these different operations. And it's worked very well. The logging group at Bogus Basin, they've been getting trees out of there. We now have a request from the same group to log an additional area called Sinker Creek. And they'd like to extend the license agreement that we have with them currently to provide a similar operation. However, what they have asked our staff, and I've already told our staff, no, it'll most likely come to you. They'd like us to amend the agreement that basically tosses out all the restrictions that the commission had already approved for this logging operation, so they can do that logging operation. Again, we sent back a staff a note saying, thank you, no, you're more than welcome to appeal to the commission if you'd like, but we feel very strongly about the safety protocols that we've put in and such, and good luck. So anyway, that may come to you, it may not, don't know. We are, if they do want to extend their license agreement with the current commission-directed safety protocols, staff has no objection, and they'll bring it to you for your thumbs up or thumbs down. But I just want to make sure you know that we've already said no to amending those protocols. Let's see. As you saw earlier, we have a request from Compass to provide a letter of recommendation or support for a federal potential project grant money to continue to work on I-84 up in the Caldwell area and such. And they had a sort of a vanilla letter that says, here, what we're going to do. Well, the reason for that is, of course, under the Biden administration, there's a bigger push for community involvement when it comes down to exercising these funds or granting these funds to local jurisdictions. In the past, ACHD has been very supportive of any opportunity that ITD has through Compass or whatever to get these type of grant funds to increase the capacities or increase the efficiency of the interstate or highways. Why? It keeps more traffic off of local roadways when the interstate works well and such. And as you've all noticed, when there is an accident on the interstate, what happens? Franklin, Fairview, everything just stops because everybody piles off and gets off into the local road structure. We have, again, in the past, the commission has been supportive because, again, our philosophy is if ITD, anything we can do to help ITD will help the local jurisdictions in whatever part of the state. And so with your okay, we are drafting a letter for the president's signature. I'll have it out for all of you that supports the Compass to go after this grant of dollars for ITD. And so we'll keep you posted. That's the history on that and such. And it's we've had good partnership in the past on making these things happen to improve not only Ada County but Idaho when it comes down to the highway and interstate operations. I did share with you, I think I shared with you, some of the rationale by this, but they will be expanding some of the lanes out there. They'll be doing safety and operational improvements if they get the grant on 10th Avenue. They're going to replace a pedestrian overpass just west of 10th Avenue. I go out there and it is not good. So that's probably that's another great thing. And they're going to do some noise reduction in that area. But anyway, the improvements are for safety and efficiency and reliability of the system. And again, we are preparing a letter for your all's consideration to do this. Now the date is 15 March. We have plenty of time to do that. But unless you have any questions on that, we're going to move forward on it and bring this to you.
Mr. President, I have a
Yes,
question.
we have a question.
Thank you, Director Wong. In my day job, I do a lot of letter support and all that good stuff and collaborate with other agencies all the time. And this is really exciting. I'm really proud to hear that you do this often. So I'm just really curious, what's the process? Again, I'm seeing that you're explaining it to the commission. Do we always have to sign off on letters of support? Is there a budget threshold if it's easier and more efficient for just you to sign them? I'm just kind of curious if there's those nuances with this type of process.
Mr. President, Commissioner, a great question. Our operations so far have been, if it's a government-to-government sort of thing, we always come to the commission. If it's more of an administrative director to, whatever, we'll do that, but then I'll advise the commission so that they're, I think well, I won't say what the comment was, but we try to keep everybody informed as best we can. But when it comes down to these sort of things, I think it's best to have the commission not only approve it, but sign it. And we generally we share it with the entire commission, but we always have the president's signature block on there for it. Does that answer that question?
It does. What about with 501c3s, like, I know Smart Growth or other nonprofits that are actively pursuing something that would partner with us? What about those types of agreements?
What we have done, again, if it's from an administrative financial perspective, the commission has given me some broad guidance and broad authority. And generally speaking, if we're looking at 501Cs that are well known by the commission and stuff, we will go ahead and support those. But again, notifying the commission that says, here's what we've done. Now, if there is something that says I'd like to build A, B, or C across this thing, we will immediately come to the commission and say, here we go. You'll see probably several times this year where a 501c will make a request for us to donate a commuter ride van. Now, that's well within my authority to say, sure. However, we come to the commission, we say, here's the pluses, here's the minuses. Are you okay with this? Here's the financial implication, because we actually lose the federal reimbursements when we sell those vans at auction. And so it is a slight hit to the budget, but at the end of the day, it's been our perspective that there's a lot of need out there. And if we have the opportunity to help, then we ought to do that and such. And so far, I think we've only turned down one request. And that was for moving kids from one sports event to another. Well, it's probably a little out there. So no, we bring just about everything to the commission, and if it isn't in a formal presentation, it'll be in a director's update, or it'll be in ops update as we go forward.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Our favorite topic right now, commissioners, Senate Bill 1106. We continue to meet with all of the stakeholders who have raised concern. The general counsel is left because he doesn't care anymore. No, doing a tremendous job on this. We strongly believe that we have answered all questions, all issues. We've actually amended some of the language based on some of the recommendations that folks have had. After our discussions, there appears to be no major concerns with those we've talked to. And again, our lobbyists and our general counsel have been very active on this across the board. Speaking of the lobbyists, there he is. Excuse me, general counsel. And so we're comfortable that all the, what I'm going to call somewhat less than factual information that was going back and forth has been answered. And those concerns by the groups that raised those issues initially have now been incorporated into the proposed language. And as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, it'll be first heard tomorrow and such. And as we understand it, seems to be pretty good support at this time. Now, as you know, I think the comment was whenever you go into a hearing or a committee meeting, it's like going into a Star Wars bar. You just never know what's going to happen. But right now, we really don't see much angst on this, other than one or two individuals and one staffer. So that's where we are. We will keep you posted if there's any other issues on this whatsoever. But it appears now that everybody truly understands the rationale and truly understands what it is and what it isn't. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to provide you, hopefully today, if not tomorrow, a one-pager, one slide that says HB 1106, here's what it is, here's what it's not. Very simple for all of you, because I'm sure you're getting questions on that.
Yeah, if I may, just a quick comment there. That one pager, is there a plan to put that on ACHD's website? Because I have had a number of questions from individuals who haven't necessarily been in the meetings where the explanations and discussion have been given.
If that's the commission's direction, of course, we're more than happy to. But again, I'd like to caution the commission to understand that this hasn't even gone to the committee yet. And so whatever comes out of that committee will be more sausage until it finally gets forward. But absolutely no problems with doing that.
Perhaps at this point, if that were at least transmitted to each of us
Right.
as commissioners so that we can answer questions that
Yeah,
come up.
that's
'Cause
our
I've had a
game
number
plan.
of questions on
Yeah.
SB 1106 as well as 1107.
Yep, Commissioner, that is our game plan.
Okay, thank you.
And then commissioners,
Mr. President? Mr. President?
Yes, Jim?
Yeah, so I've also had lots of questions. As you know, I do support the notion of printing bills so that discussions can take place, because in an RS form, it's exempt from disclosure, so people don't know that something's happening until it's printed as a bill, which of course is why I'm disappointed that our original impact fee bill wasn't printed the way that we wanted it to be printed, because now the conversation can't happen until it's printed. So the conversations seem to be starting, and I think that's good. We've operated fine without having this particular language in the statute for many years, 50 years. So I don't have a problem with us continuing those conversations with our partners, because the number one priority is to strengthen the partnership with the local government. And if there's any perception or the sense that, no, we're exempt from this, and I think it was raised from the introduction of 1149. Again, 1149 apparently was introduced to start a discussion. I have no problem with us going over the next year and making sure that not only do we answer one or two individuals, that we really have the full support of our partners going forward. So I would support us holding back and being fine, absolutely fine, with the committee holding this bill and allowing us to continue to have discussions with Ada County and the 6 cities in our county, because that relationship, those relationships are so important on so many fronts. And I don't want something to interfere with that because we have characterized it as less than factual information, or that there's just one or two individuals and a staff member that has problems. Because I keep getting questions.
Mr. President, if I could make sure we clarify something here, there is no misinformation or that has come out of the Ada County Highway District. My comment is that there was misinformation and interpretation from one or two other individuals and agencies. Our team has been working very closely with all those that are concerned, and again, the draft legislation has been crafted so that it encompasses their concerns and answers those concerns across the board. But again, being crystal clear, there is no misinformation that are nothing factual that's come out of the Ada County Highway District.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I have a question. Director Wong, could we, in that one pager, 1 to 2 pager, can you also include a breakdown of unintended consequences if this bill was to come to be? Because I think that's where a lot of my questions are coming from, is We understand that this is your intent, but what about the other downstream effects of this bill?
Commissioner, Mr. President, Commissioner, absolutely. Again, those are the discussions we've had, and more than happy to.
Thank you.
All right.
And other than that, we were already past your start time, and I do apologize to the commission.
That's right. Well, we got it done. Thank you, all of you who are here in attendance and via Zoom today. I see there's 33 participants on Zoom. That's a good average for what we've had recently. And again, thank you for being here. We'll begin our commission meeting today with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, before I begin the meeting by making a mistake like I did last week, I would like to acknowledge an award that we received here at ACHD this past couple of weeks from the Women in Transportation of Southwest Idaho. We were chosen as the WTS Employer of the Year for many reasons. It was my honor to accept this award on behalf of the Highway District. And just to brag a little more, it seemed like we kind of swept a lot of awards, which has been mentioned already before, but Christy Little, Kathleen Godfrey, Gary Inselman, and Diane Bevins also received awards similar to this, and we're very proud of them, very grateful for the acknowledgement. I think it was deserved. I'm a big fan of this place, as most of you know, and so thanks to WTS. Now, I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
I'll move to accept the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, then we'll go to the regular, the consent agenda, sorry. And items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless the commissioner or member of the public requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and put on the regular agenda. And all consent agenda items are considered as action items unless noted. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So
Mr.
moved.
President, I move we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, then we will go to the regular agenda. We have two items on the agenda. We will only be addressing one of them because item number 2, which is the resolution number 2339, we opened last week as a public hearing and continued it till today. Well, we're going to continue it again until April 14th, time certain. And I would entertain a motion to do that.
Mr. President,
So moved, Mr. President.
I move that we defer or continue item number 2, resolution number 2339 to April 14th commission meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Good, now we can give adequate time to item number 1, which is Albertsons grocery store and gas station convenience store requesting a modification from our policy and requesting our approval of that modification. And presenting for staff will be Christy Little.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Christy Little, Development Services Manager. And before you today is a request for modification of policy for the Albertsons Certificate of Zoning Compliance at Eagle and Amity. I'm going to go through a couple of slides just to make sure you're oriented with the site and keep you informed of where we are with our projects in the area. So as I mentioned, it's at the northwest corner of Eagle and Amity. Currently, there's a single lane roundabout at that intersection.
Christy, are you sharing your screen with the Zoom participants? Could you do that really quick?
Oh, yes. I could see it, but down here, but not on the laptops.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was a.
Oh. Good catch.
Thank you, Commissioner Pickering. All right, so as I was saying, currently there's a single lane roundabout at the intersection of Eagle and Amity. We are also underway with our project, our Eagle Road widening project from Victory to Amity, which includes a roundabout at the Zalvia Eagle intersection. And we're just underway now with the intersection project as well. Here's a little closer look at the neighborhood. This site, which will go into the history, has a lot of local street connections as well as these Zalvia and Montague collector streets that are in the area. And so this is the site plan for the CZC. The driveways circled in blue are the driveways that we're going to discuss today. So both Eagle and Amity are principal arterials, so they have stricter access regulations on them per our policy. So this Eagle Road driveway that's circled in blue, which is meant to serve the Albertsons site, it's located just 290 feet south of Mount Edna Drive, which is the local street here at the top, and 450 feet from the Eagle-Amity intersection. So it does meet the intersection spacing for this driveway, but not the spacing from Mount Edna. The driveway is far enough away from the roundabout that there won't be any operational conflicts, and per the traffic impact study, this driveway is necessary to serve the site due to the number of trips for the overall development, not just the Albertsons. ECHD has incorporated this driveway into our design for the Eagle Road widening, along with the turn lane that was required for that driveway. Staff is recommending a modification of this driveway on Eagle Road to allow this right-in, right-out, with the condition, as noted in the staff report, that the applicant reimburse ACHD for the cost of those site improvements that are specific to Albertsons, which is the turn lane and the driveway itself, because ACHD...
Can I ask you for a favor, Christy?
Sure.
I'm having a hard time understanding you.
Let's
Thank
do this.
you.
I might do it. So ACHD, as I said, will be constructing site improvements for Albertsons, and we do expect that they will reimburse us for the cost of the turn lane and the driveway. However, we are also building sidewalk on Eagle and at Eagle Amity at the intersection, and we will be paying for that because we are ahead of their development project anyway, and it's part of the overall system. Now, the Amity Road driveway, we'll get into more specifics about the conflicts as we get through this presentation. It also meets spacing requirements just barely from the intersection of Eagle Road, and does meet the spacing requirements from Beleza Way, which is the new street that they'll be constructing with their project. However, the driveway with this design that ACHD is constructing right now, it will create multiple conflicts with vehicles entering the site, exiting the site, and merging and going through the roundabout. So we'll get into those conflict points in just a minute. But first, we have to go through some history. Commissioner Goldthorpe will remember it well. So in late 2016, ACHD reviewed the preliminary plat for Farin's subdivision. As a part of that approval, the developer, which is Albertsons Corporation, agreed to enter into a cooperative development agreement with ACHD to expand the Eagle-Amity intersection to a dual lane roundabout. This would be prior to our widening of the Eagle Road segment, which we're doing right now. In addition, ACHD granted certain access points on Eagle Road and Amity Road, but those with the plat were only these two new local streets here. The commission did not approve the driveway on Eagle and the driveway on Amity that we're discussing today. They, although recommended by staff at that time, the commission didn't feel that there was enough justification for the need for the driveway and that it could be handled at a later date when we actually got a specific land use application. This was just a conceptual plan to go with the plat in 2016. So in 2017, we got the certificate of zoning application for the Albertsons and their fuel center. And all of these other buildings you see are pad sites for future. So the CZC is really just for the grocery store and the associated gas station and C-store right in this area. So at the time we received this development application, which again was consistent with the preliminary plat and the conceptual plan for a grocery store, we did in fact approve those driveways, one on Eagle and one on Amity, as right-in, right-out access points. They were to be constructed with medians in the center of Eagle and the center of Amity, and with deceleration lanes or right turn lanes. The CZC application from 2017 expired sometime before 2020. The city wasn't tracking it well, but it was before the final plat extension, which we'll get to, and because it expired, the original conditions of approval are null and void. So the city required them to submit a new CZC application and start their process all over. And then the conclusion of the history is the final plat extension, time extension that came to us in 2020. It's not unusual for a developer to request a time extension on a final plat from the land use agency. In this case, we had received a second time extension request. So Meridian had already allowed one time extension. That was coming due. And so the second time around was in August 2020, during which time ACHD did provide written comments to the city and the applicant, stating that the prior conditions from the CZC were null and void because that permit or application had become inactive and expired. So in 2016, well, now we're going to talk about the cooperative development agreement. That was a condition of approval with the preliminary plat. So we required that the applicant enter into the CDA to widen the roundabout at the intersection. The applicant supported that, and in fact, they wanted to pursue that in part because they wanted intersection improvements completed before they actually had customers entering their buildings, just for ease of access, and they would have already put in landscaping, and so that was their intent. So in 2017, we entered into that formal CDA with Albertsons with the requirement that they had to have the project designed and constructed by June of 2018. In February of 2018, the applicant requested an extension. They said they couldn't execute the agreement in the time allotted, and we allowed them to extend their completion date to October of 19. The reason for the dates being so critical is that ACHD had this Eagle Road widening project in the plans, and we were trying to make sure that this intersection was constructed prior to the roadway being widened so there wouldn't be as much disruption to the traveling public. So we agreed with the October 19 completion date because it didn't interfere with our project. But then we didn't hear a whole lot. In May through September of 2019, we reached out to the applicant via email and voicemail multiple times. And about late May, they said, well, you know, we probably aren't going to get to it this year. We'd like to discuss another extension with you. Time's going to run out for us. But check back with us in July, because we will have kind of completed our capital planning for Albertsons, and we'll see where we are. And we had no feedback from them during June, July, August. Finally in September, the applicant, I think, responded to a final email about us needing to terminate the CDA because it was expiring at the end of October, and clearly they couldn't complete it. We couldn't extend the agreement because it wasn't clear if they actually intended to construct the improvements or not. So this is ACHD's project timeline with regard to the roundabout. The roundabout wasn't in our plans, of course, because it was assumed that Albertsons would be constructing the improvements. But because they did not execute the CDA in late winter of 2020, we had to take on the role of, well, we had to decide, one, if we were going to construct it with our Eagle Road project or just put it off to a future year. But in putting it off, it would have interfered with other intersection projects in the area that we already had programmed and ready to move forward with. To ensure the project would get completed on time, we entered into a contract with HDR engineers for the design. And the timeline for that is pretty straightforward, as shown on the slide. But due to the inaction of the CDA with Albertsons, it really put ACHD in a significant time crunch to get the project designed and off the ground to the point where we are now, where the project is underway. So in June of 2020, so last summer, the developer had requested that we provide some additional analysis of the roundabout and the needs for the bypass lanes and just the overall operations. HDR did so and provided 3 different scenarios for the intersection itself. So one would be to widen with a dual lane roundabout, no bypass lane. The second would be dual lane roundabout with bypass lane. And the third would be to scrap the roundabout and just have a signalized intersection. Ultimately, the preferred option was the dual lane roundabout with the bypass lane. The reason for the bypass lane is that it allows the roundabout to function at an acceptable level of service through at least 2041, based on the estimates and compass models with HDR. Without the southbound bypass lane, the intersection operations are just assumed that they will fail faster. And the dual lane roundabout, as opposed to the signal in this scenario, works well because of the roundabout we were constructing just a half mile up the road at Zaldia and Eagle. I might also mention that the city of Meridian and the ACHD commissioners met in October in a joint meeting to discuss the options, and the final design was approved by the commission a week later at the end of October. So we're going to go through a couple of slides just to help, hopefully, help describe what the conflict points are if we allow the driveway on Amity and where our concerns are with regard to safety. So in this scenario, the driver in the bypass lane, that's the blue car, they are having to slow down because the red car in front of them is turning right into the Albertsons. But at the same time, they are trying to accelerate through the intersection and merge over as the bypass lane is ending. So this first conflict area, really the safety concern there is the amount of rear end collisions as we have one vehicle slowing to make a maneuver and another vehicle speeding up to make their maneuver. In this scenario, we still have the red and the blue vehicles, but then we'll add on the green vehicle, which has come through the roundabout. So the car is going westbound on Amity through the roundabout, and they want to turn right into the Albertsons driveway. And rather than go up to this street here, they want to enter in at the closest driveway. So again, we have the conflict with the turning car already. So now we have two cars trying to turn into the driveway at the same time, with perhaps another car sitting, waiting to turn right out of the driveway. And then we still have the car coming out of the bypass lane, which here now this creates a T-bone type collision in addition to the rear end collision. And this scenario shows the driver exiting that driveway on Amity. So again, as they're exiting, which doesn't usually happen fast, then we have these conflict points, again with the driver accelerating, coming through the bypass lane and merging onto Amity, while that person, the driver coming out, is doing the same. And then of course we've got this through traffic conflict still as well. ACHD policy 7104.1, this was included in the staff memo. These are the findings that the commission is required to make prior to approving a modification or waiver of policy. So if the commission opts to approve the modifications of policy, you'll need to cite specific findings from this particular section of policy. So staff recommendation is, as discussed, we recommend that the commission approve the modification request for the right-in, right-out driveway on Eagle Road, in part because we've designed it and are comfortable with the safety of how that driveway will operate with our intersection project, and with the condition that the applicant reimburse ACHD for the design and construction of the turn lane and the driveway that we've incorporated into our design and will be constructing, because those are not, those improvements wouldn't be constructed without the Albertsons site there. And then staff recommends denial of the proposed right-in, right-out on driveway due to the proximity of the driveway to the roundabout and the bypass lane and safety concerns associated with those movements. So that is what I have for my presentation, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you very much. I know how much work has gone into this since the first and second extension. So it is our proposal where the red oval is to not allow that, correct?
That's correct.
Well, the whole time you were discussing the conflict points there, I was thinking of a couple of other places in the county that we're going to hopefully fix one day where conflicts similar to that have caused numerous, mostly rear ends and some T-bones. And so to hear that that's not being proposed is wonderful. Thank you very much. Any other commissioners have any questions or comments?
I have a couple of questions.
Mr. President.
We'll go ahead and go with Commissioner McKinney first.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Christy, just a couple of questions. Number one, in the history of this particular development, did ACHD ever previously indicate to the developer that the right-in, right-out location and roundabout were acceptable? Was there ever any previous indication to them that what they're showing now worked?
Commissioner McKinney, we did in fact approve the driveway with the first certificate of zoning compliance, so the first Albertsons application that then expired.
Okay. Was the roundabout design different at that time? Did it not have the bypass lane?
Commissioner McKinney, it was fairly similar. I think it didn't get get the same amount of attention perhaps as this design with the outside consultant.
Okay, so previously the developer had reason to believe that this could work, and since those development applications expired, et cetera, and now they're coming back, we're looking at it and saying it doesn't work.
That's correct.
And that's the situation. Okay. If this right-in, right-out access point were to work, how much further west from the intersection would it need to be moved?
Commissioner McKinney, our policy requires driveways on principal arterials to be located approximately 335 feet from the intersection, which is close here, or beyond the limits of the intersection. So some intersections, if they've got dual turn lanes or something more than just the regular 5x5 intersection, the limits of the project, or the limits of the intersection, probably exceed our policy. So it's whichever is greater, either that 335 number or outside of the influence area of the intersection.
Okay, so in this case, how far away are we from being there?
We are right at the tail end of the influence area, or right in the middle of the tail end, because we still are right in that bypass lane.
So if that right-in, right-out access point were moved, what, 40 or 50 feet further west, it would be acceptable?
Commissioner McKinney, it would meet the offsets from the intersection of Eagle, but it wouldn't meet the offsets from the new street that they're constructing.
So let's see, that's the one to the west.
That's Beleza.
So essentially, what that's saying then is that given the location of the intersection and the location of the street, there is no place along that frontage where the developer could put an access point.
That's correct. I'm going to pull up this earlier slide so we can see all of the access points into the site. So with the subdivision, the applicant is required to construct Mount Etna out to Eagle. And then on Mount Etna, they have a driveway like the main service, two main service drive aisles to Albertsons and the fuel stations. And then they'll also be constructing Beleza. And as you can see, there are 1, 2, 3 driveways into the Albertsons site from Beleza. But if you get the driveway moved over, then you get into turning conflicts, rear end collisions again, where somebody turns on their signal to maybe turn right into the driveway, but the person behind them thinks they're not going to turn right until Beleza. That's why we need the appropriate spacing between those driveways.
So basically then, the essentially the long and short is that there is no extent along that portion of the frontage where an access point could be put and satisfy all the design standards.
That's correct, Commissioner McKinney, and they do, of course, have the full access at Beleza with their new street from Amity Road.
In this situation then, well, no, I guess there's no need to ask that. So, okay, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, Christy, thank you. Is this this widening of the intersection impact fee eligible?
Commissioner Hanson, it is, I'm trying to think of the percentage, but it's very much impact fee eligible.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That also impacts the timing. The construction of this intersection, do we anticipate once it's built, this huge new roundabout, to be in place for 30 years, 50 years? What's the anticipated?
Commissioner Hanson, I don't know the amount of time, but yes, we're out to that 20, 30, 40-year range.
Right. Looking back on the procedures at the October 28th meeting, me and another commissioner expressed objections to the design, especially with respect to the bypass lane, the acceleration lane, mostly because of the danger it posed to pedestrians on that side, because there's no bypass lane or acceleration lane on the other 3 corners. But for some reason, we wanted to retain that, which posed safety issues. So ultimately, we said, well, our motion didn't make it. It was another motion that said, come back with new designs and let us look at those. Those new designs, though, were discussed at a work session, right? I don't think we actually voted. I can't seem to find a record of a vote on the new designs.
Commissioner Hanson, President Goldthorpe. So my knowledge and presentation is simply about this development application, but I'll let our capital projects folks speak to questions about the actual intersection design.
I think Ryan Cutler was the presenter.
Yep, Madam President, or Mr. President, Commissioner, I'm here, Ryan Cutler, Project Manager for the capital project taking place at Eagle and Amity, and the widening taking place on Eagle Road. Commissioner Hanson, that is an accurate statement that we had a discussion not only with the City of Meridian at a joint session where we discussed mostly pedestrian-related items. Most of those pedestrian-related items discussed the local road crossings at the intersections along Eagle Road. There was some discussion about the crossing there at the roundabout where staff let the commission know, and also the City of Meridian know, that the crossing location there would have flashing signals to let oncoming traffic know that there are crossings there, and that these crossing distances would be fairly similar if it was a roundabout or a signal. They're about similar in length. That was really the extent of the discussion that took place about the pedestrian crossing.
Thanks, Ryan. You or Christy might be able to answer this. So the commission asked for potential alternatives to come back to us. We were concerned about pedestrians, and of course, they don't go to a site just to go to it. They actually go to it to solicit business or to participate in business or their employees or whatnot. So there was a time frame between the October 28th period and when we came back. How much was the property owners on that corner, the land people who would be impacted by whether it is or isn't safe for pedestrians, involved in that process of figuring out what the best design would be and how it would work with respect to people using all modes?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, maybe a follow-up question. Mr. Hanson, are you referring to the Eagle roundabout crossing itself or the local road crossing at the entrance to Albertsons?
Well, what we asked for was to come back, and obviously it has an impact on the property as to how their property would function. If people feel safe going there along the road, Amity and Eagle, or if they don't feel safe, it does impact their business. So I guess it's procedurally, I want to know how they were engaged, because in their letter, they say they really weren't fully engaged. Basically, we were operating, assuming they're just going to have to take it. The concerns we were with respect that we aired were with respect to people who would use the site, pedestrians, people in wheelchairs, people cycling. But of course, they don't just cycle or walk there. They actually go there to do something. And so my question is, how were they engaged in the process between the October 28th meeting and the time in which we were presented with the alternatives?
Commissioner Hanson, this is Justin Lucas, Deputy Director of Planning and Project Management. Just want to jump in here and hopefully provide answers to your questions. I think Christy accurately reported the timeline of how this project has gone forward. It is certainly under construction now. I don't exactly recall the direction from the commission to come back with anything associated with the roundabout. What I recall, and this is just from my remembrance of the meeting, the larger issue that the commission wanted us to review was the pathway crossings at the local roads and some potential landscaping impacts at Rome Drive, and coordinate with the City of Meridian on that and the Homeowners Association of Tuscany, which we are doing to this day, and have plans to work on those issues and and make those changes as appropriate to the project. So I'm not sure if we can answer your question, Commissioner Hanson, directly about coordination with Albertsons. We have worked with them. We have shared the designs of this project with them. Some of the issues raised that were already raised, the right turn lane on Eagle Road, that entrance on Eagle Road is incorporated into our project. The entrance on Amity Road is not incorporated into our project because staff is not recommending that we include that entrance off of Amity Road, that right in, right out. So I appreciate the applicant's letter, but I don't know how much more information staff can provide than what we have already provided.
Okay, thanks. I think that answers the questions. I'll wait to hear from the applicant, but I think Ryan will recall that I strongly objected at the time to having a free-running bypass lane, that it is dangerous. It encourages speed, and that I anticipated in the future we will be spending the taxpayers' money to remove these. I know that is the goal at Vista and Overland, and there's other locations where we're going to be removing these because by then we will actually have some metrics to show that what we save in supposedly save in fractions of seconds and seconds for drivers who like to accelerate around intersections and roundabouts, we give up in danger to all other users. And when all other users see a dangerous place, that has an impact on land use. So that's my concern. I'm trying to figure out just when, whether it's too late. Thanks. I'll wait to hear from the applicant.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Question for you. I was just wondering, what are some of the examples that you referred to in your earlier comments about other projects building a driveway like this and having those T-bones or those rear end accidents? Are there some that come off the top of your head?
Actually, not a project like this. It's the residential area right near my home where 10 Mile and Lamont comes together.
So it's not a roundabout, it's an intersection though?
Right.
Okay. I do have a question. Ryan, is the flashing yellow beacon, is that going to be on Balaza and Edna, or is that going to be on other streets?
Mr. President, Commissioner, thank you. So those flashing beacons will be at the actual crossing locations at the roundabout, so not at the local streets there. We will have a pedestrian crossing, a signalized pedestrian crossing about a half mile to the north at the canal location. There will be crossing options at the roundabout at Zaldia, and then at the actual intersection of Eagle and Amity, the flashing beacons will be at the crosswalk locations at the roundabout.
Thank you. No, I definitely echo some of Commissioner Hanson's concerns. They're just with how that intersection is developing with the YMCA, and there's just so much activity with kiddos and things like that. So it's really important to me, at least, that we ensure that and roundabouts typically aren't always that accessible for pedestrians and bicyclists. So anything we can do to make that safer is really important to me. I'm just curious, with the driveway on Amity, I'm thinking of Fairview and Eagle Road, that intersection, and there is a driveway into that complex into Albertsons. And I'm just curious, Christy, if that's any recollection, what's the spacing with that driveway? And in that case, they had an additional turn lane that you can merge into to turn in. Is that not considered similarly to this project? And could you explain why?
Commissioner Pickering, that's a great question. I can't remember because it was, I don't know, 15 years ago. But with regard to the deceleration lane, because of the size or the number of lanes right around that intersection and on Fairview, a deceleration lane was required. A deceleration lane in this location wouldn't really work because we have the bypass lane. So just picture putting another lane and then we've really wiped out the project. And that's not really functional. Again, it's just putting in another layer of conflict. Which way do I go to get to this driveway?
Okay. And then I'm just curious too, with the acceleration lane, I saw in the earlier speed limit signs. So can you explain what the speed limit is on Amity after this project is completed?
I will let Capital Projects answer that.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, as you're aware, whenever we design a roundabout or a signal or anything that we do at an intersection, we evaluate what the safest speed and path through is. That is no different here at a roundabout. We study on how to make the curves correct within the roundabout or a bypass lane to be able to slow down traffic significantly enough to where we feel like it is safe not only for the traveling public in a vehicle, but also for any sort of pedestrian that might be in the area. As far as the actual speed limit on Amity, the Amity speed limit does not change after the roundabout is put in. That same speed limit will maintain as you get beyond the actual site, Albertsons site. So they're at Malazia, or Belize, excuse me, that local road intersection, there is no intent to change the speed limit at this point in time from that point on. We anticipate the vehicles will be slowing down based on our design to go through the roundabout, and then after that, they will accelerate as they get past the site back to the regular speed limit.
Thank you, Ryan.
Having heard you say that, Ryan, is there any possibility that you can maintain the same speed within the roundabout until you get to Balaza Way?
Mr. President, that's a great question. We can obviously post the speed limit that we'd like to see done there, but as you're aware, we can't dictate what a vehicle is going to do once they get out of that roundabout based on speed. Certainly, we could have our traffic folks analyze how far that speed would be effective getting past Belize Way and then returning to the normal speed that's posted there now. That would have to be an analysis done by our traffic team. But as you're aware, we can post a speed. It's up to the driver at that point in time whether they follow that or not.
Yes, I do realize that, but considering the conflict points that might exist there if this is allowed to be created, I would think that having the posted speed less than it is west of Balaza would possibly cause people to think twice before they put the metal down to and sped up, because I do know how what the speed limit is there west of Balaza, and you don't want to be letting people accelerate to that before Balaza. Just my opinion.
Mr. President,
Yes,
we'll do that.
thank you. Okay, Mary, do you have any comments or questions?
Nope, not yet. Look forward to hearing from the applicant. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, and Christy, thank you very much. And now, before we do hear from the applicant, I need to make an ex parte disclosure that I just forgot to do until now, and that is that the applicant called me months ago, and we had a brief discussion about a couple of these particular issues, at which time I requested that if they wanted to get into this discussion, that they schedule a time before the commission, and that took months to get scheduled. So anyway, with that in mind, we will turn the time now over to the applicant. I know the applicant is here somewhere.
He is Eric Holzer.
Eric, yes. Eric was the individual that I spoke with.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Eric Holzer here with Albertsons Companies, 250 East Park Center Boulevard here in Boise, 83706. President Goldthorpe and the commissioners, thank you in advance for hearing this today. I've been involved with this project for a long time. I met with you all late in 2016 as we began our entitlement process here. And as we go forward, this has been a very frustrating, sticky point for myself in talking with the city, them too, although I'm not representing them. But this is just beyond frustrating to me. So I will be very professional today. I also have a bit of history on the project, which I also forwarded to you and the balance of the commissioners last week. But with that, we'd like to address the modification of policy related to our project located at the northwest corner of Eagle and Amity Roads, also known as Ferenz Plaza. Specifically, the recommendation of staff to deny the request that was previously approved for a right-in, right-out access on Amity that we've been discussing. The rationale for the denial provided by staff was the access point does not meet spacing requirements and conflicts with the expanded roundabout that will be constructed this year by ACHD. Looking back in 2016, specifically, the staff addressed this point in a letter of support from ACHD to the City of Meridian. It's dated December 28, 2016, which stated the applicant demonstrated the need for the access point, and the driveways would provide enhanced site circulation and decrease impact of the surrounding neighborhood, that being Tuscany. Several of you recall that testimony from property owners in the Tuscany neighborhood. They were very focused on mitigating cut-through traffic through the subdivision and very concerned for safety. Our project has the same layout as it did when it was supported by staff and approved by this commission. The roundabout has been there for over a decade and is currently planned for expansion with construction underway. The spacing hasn't changed from the initial approval. However, ACHD redesigned the roundabout expansion project from what was previously approved. Albertsons paid $227,000 and change to design the expansion project for the roundabout under the cooperative development agreement with ACHD and submitted progress plans to ACHD on 6 different occasions. ACHD provided final approval of those plans on February 11, 2018. When ACHD approved the driveway in connection with our specific development in 2017, staff cited District Policy 7205.4.1, and I'll just quote, access points have been reviewed, shall be reviewed only for development application that's being considered by the lead land use agency. Approved access points may be relocated and or restricted in future land use if future land use intensifies, changes, or the property redevelops. The development application approved in 2017 is being constructed this year by Albertsons. Nothing has changed with the City of Meridian or Ferenz Plaza. The land use hasn't intensified and it hasn't changed. Staff recommended the modification of policy with our prior approval to accommodate the right-in, right-out access on Amity based on traffic studies that were done and provided to ACHD by Albertsons. Based on these entitlement approvals, we made significant financial decisions and invested a lot of money in the design of our project to get to this point. We closed on the property in March of 2017. So this is really the second time we've requested this modification of policy for the same access point. As previously mentioned, Albertsons and ACHD entered into a cooperative development agreement in August of 2017, wherein Albertsons would design the improvements for the expanded roundabout, the Eagle Road improvements, and the widening of Amity Road. The CDA would allow Alberts to synchronize the timing of the off-site improvements with the construction of the shopping center, as ACHD did not have the expanded roundabout in their improvement plan for construction until 2022. So the compression of the time frame was not caused by Albertsons. It was caused by the acceleration of the project to meet new goals established by ACHD. The collaborative development agreement was extended till October 31st, 2019, where it expired. We were delayed, no doubt denying that. ACHD did send a notice of termination shortly thereafter. So flash forward a few years, January of 2020, a construction manager from ACHD notified Albertsons that they intended to move forward with the prescribed improvements in November of 2020. A full 2 years ahead of where the project was initially planned from our perspective based on what we knew. ACHD had the rights to plans for the expanded roundabout under the CDA. Given this, and the fact that ACHD had approved the plans for the expanded roundabout, we were encouraged to hear that ACHD had accelerated the project so it would synchronize with our own timing. This would have been great. Several months go by without communication, and in July of last year, ACHD informed the City of Meridian via email they redesigned the project, and the new design may have an impact on future development on the northwest corner. That's a quote. Several weeks go by, and our consultant, the land group, receives an email confirming the redesign to include a bypass lane. The land group then provides this information to Albertsons. Still no direct communication with Albertsons, the major stakeholder owning nearly 40 acres at that intersection. Several attempts were made to discuss this design with ACHD and its engineer. I personally spoke with Dave Wallace several times by phone, wherein he agreed to have his engineers our engineers to work together towards a solution that would allow the approved right-in, right-out access on Amity to remain. We hired John Ringard of Kittleson Associates to provide analysis supporting that access. We were advised that the revised plans for the expansion of the roundabout that ACHD completed on their dime were 95% complete, and that ACHD would not consider any changes, citing safety concerns. Following John's discussion with ACHD and its engineer, he notes that the only issue ACHD was attempting to resolve was the increase in delay for right turns that would occur with the yield right turn in our design versus the bypass lane in the redesign by ACHD. He also commented that delays, such as standard right turns, have never been unsafe. I'm not sure how ACHD can redesign an intersection without considering the impact on an approved development with a signed development agreement with the City of Meridian, let alone without communicating during the process. This is much a surprise to us, me in particular. Albertsons has spent a significant amount of money on the design of this project, and consideration of the expanded roundabout have been relied upon previously for the approved access. To have the access changed without notice or input is certainly unfair and doesn't seem to comply with the district's own policy. This is true even just recently as yesterday. The design continues to evolve. I received an email last Friday from ACHD's construction manager informing us that the pedestrian crossing you can see on your screen today at Mount Etna and Eagle Road to the north, this was, I'd anticipated because I actually heard from the appraiser hired by ACHD. He sent me the plan sheet and said to substitute it in his right-of-way appraisal. So I then, we got communication from ACHD regarding these plans and the revised right-of-way acquisition. And the crosswalk that has been redesigned here now cuts through our fuel center parcel, crosses Mount Etna Drive, and then cuts the corner off one of the back of our building envelopes planned for the professional office pads on just north of Etna Drive on Eagle Road. So this is just the revised plans. It's just another example that our development's not being taken into consideration with these improvements. So to conclude, the project hasn't changed, the land use hasn't intensified, and we're only asking for the access that was previously approved. We're also willing to help find a design that works for everyone. Please approve the modification of policy for the right-in, right-out on Amity. And I believe John Ringer with Kittleson is also on the line should you have technical questions. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holzer. Appreciate that very much. Are there any questions of the applicant from the commission?
I do, Mr. President.
Yes.
Mr. Holzer, so, I mean, I don't want to belabor the point, but you're saying that you weren't notified ahead of the redesign. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Were you?
We learned about the redesign through a call we had with the City of Meridian, one of their staff mentioned to us that they received communication from ACHD. That's how we heard about the redesign. We did get an email, like I mentioned, in January of 2020 saying ACHD was moving forward with the project because the development agreement had expired on their own, and a request to utilize the plans that we had commissioned ourselves and paid for.
So were you aware of the, I'm going to probably mess up my words here, the CV, is it the C?
Cooperative Development Agreement?
Yeah, the Cooperative Development Agreement. So you weren't aware of that expiring?
No, I was aware of that expiring.
Okay.
If you recall, ACHD moved this project forward in their development plan. It was planned for 2022. So when they decided to move forward with the project on an earlier time frame, that's when they sent a notice of termination. The agreement had already expired. They wouldn't extend it, but they also sent a notice of termination to follow up.
Okay, perfect. And then you mentioned I forget who you mentioned, I think it was a program manager or whatever, that things are always evolving. Could you expand on that a little bit more, kind of give me a little bit more context for what you mean by that in terms of the project currently?
Yeah, sure. So we had a set of plans from ACHD that involved the expanded roundabout, the current design that with the bypass lane. We had been sent a right-of-way acquisition package from ACHD with a set of plans in it. Looking through those, then we heard later that the plans had changed again with regard to a pedestrian crosswalk at Mount Etna and Eagle Road, crossing Mount Etna to the north-south there. And it moved the crosswalk further into the Albertsons property. And all we were told was, hey, substitute this sheet into the right-of-way package without regard to the fact that it's going to require additional right-of-way, which we now received yesterday as in the mail from, I believe, Renee Jao. So that's the reference, is that the project continues to change, and we don't get communication. We get plans that say, here, this is what we're doing.
Thank you, Eric.
Mr. President, I have a question, if I may. Mr. Holzer, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate you taking time to be here. I just have a question. I'm concerned about this lack of communication. You mentioned an email that you received in January. When was the last time there was communication, the date, please, if you will, from ACHD regarding this project and the new design?
I think direct communication, Ms. Commissioner, was, I don't have a timeline, exact timeline for that, but it was I believe it was in August of 2020. And we had a group call that Dave Wallace participated in, and I ended up calling Dave. We went back and forth during the month of September, trying to see if we could be part of a solution here involving the bypass lane and potentially going back to the previously designed lane with a yield there. The exact date, it was in September, late August to September of last year.
Okay, so we're all in agreement that you were aware of the expiration of the CDA. So August of 2020, you had a conversation with Dave Wallace about looking further for a mutual solution. And is that then the last communique until January?
That was, okay, I think January of what year?
I thought you said you just got an email in January of this year.
No. We received an email in January of 2020 from the construction manager who said, the collaborative development agreement is now expired. We terminated it. and we are moving forward with the project on our own accord. Would you
Okay.
please send me the plans? Would you please authorize the use of the plans that Albertsons had commissioned and paid for? And of course, ACHD had the rights to those anyway under the cooperative development agreement.
Okay, so between January and August, there were conversations about what was taking place between January and August 2020? I've heard a lot of that you've been kind of in the dark and there hasn't been any communication, so I'm just trying to ascertain exactly what type of lag there was.
I received no direct communication from ACHD, and I don't believe our consultant did either during that time period.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, Mr. President.
Yes.
So thank you, Mr. Holzer. We received a staff report with your letter attached and the staff recommendation last Friday. Yesterday, we received a memo from the director that, of course, encouraged us to go along with the staff recommendation, which is not surprising. But it also said that you will be presented with factual chain of events to include Albertsons' lapse in their prior commitments within the 2016 preliminary plat, and their lapse in allowing their zoning approvals to expire both with ACHD and Meridian. So the implication here is that there's some kind of desire to allow these things to lapse. And I just wanted you to clarify. Did you get a copy of that memo we got yesterday?
I did not.
Okay. And so if you could speak to that, it does raise the issue of, it implies that you allow these things to lapse. And it sounds like in the normal course of events, it's different. We're not experts. None of the five of us are experts on these procedures. So if you could clarify, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so we were delayed with our project coming out of the ground with our project and getting started there. That's not a point of contention for us. And Christy Little did reach out, and so did I believe it's one of the accountants with ACHD had reached out about that agreement several times, and we chatted. We don't review the improvement plan every week, so there wasn't a need to jump back on a phone and give a change of status, because it doesn't happen like that. It really happens once a year in late August or early September. We recast the future pipeline, so to speak. So it's not our intention to allow things to have lapsed here, but it is the circumstance we find ourselves in today. It's nothing we do intentionally.
Yeah, no, and there was some little thing called a pandemic last year that kind of threw everybody's procedures off. I have a question, though, now that you've raised it, because it wasn't brought to our attention when we were talking about the crosswalks and trying to figure out a safe crosswalk, but it directly affects whether this crosswalk is going to be used or not, whether it might safely get you across the street, but if people end up going through a fuel center, is this what, this is the evidence you've presented, is that this crosswalk will require people to basically go through a fuel center, a gas station, to go and to get to other points on the site. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Wow. So that wasn't presented to us, as far as I can recall, when we were discussing this. So the way in which you've envisioned the development of this site, and I'm just looking from the materials that were presented to us, the design of the layout, which is quite different from other sites where you often have parking lots that are up against the sidewalks and the streets. In this case, you have buildings for presumably other ancillary businesses that you want people to come to, as well as to Albertsons. Were these buildings that are along Amity and Eagle open to Amity and Eagle, or would they only open into the parking lot? Is that the design, that they would be both?
There, the pads the building envelopes are placed on the pads. We haven't designed those out pads. They're typically made for other users. So it would be dependent on the user. I would doubt a bank would have for example, a bank would not likely have a secondary entrance that faces the street due to some, propensity for liability there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. I'm trying to figure out, there's land uses. Every decision we make impacts land use and whether people feel comfortable soliciting that business or going to work for that business by a multi-modes of transportation, or whether the only way that they feel comfortable doing it is by automobile. And it has a direct effect on whether the facilities we then build are going to be used or not. And I've seen that throughout. Obviously, it's a sort of a logical extension. So the concept for the design of this, and looking at the access points to the neighborhoods in that block, was to encourage a lot of people to come and walk and bike to your businesses. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, we like walkability, sure. With the YMCA, the schools that are planned down there, I think this will be the intersection there with a roundabout. Will certainly be heavily traveled. At least this is my perception. Will certainly be heavily traveled by pedestrians. Yeah. My perception is that this is intended by Meridian to be an urban center. That this is not it's city center, but it's an urban center for multi-modes, and that's why we had the joint meetings with them back in October when they raised this, and they raised concerns that we were accelerating this project a year. I think those are all my questions. The rest are to staff. I did.
Mr. President,
excuse me. That's okay.
Go ahead, Eric.
I'm just going to offer, I did have the plan that was sent to us, the package we received yesterday, overlaid onto our site plan too. This isn't, I'm not, this is something that is, that impacts the development.
Okay.
I'm happy to share my screen if you'd like to see it.
Yeah, that would be great. I did read in your report that you had no land use intensity, and that in fact that does raise concerns about whether.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see this
conflict
at the moment. Can you see my screen now?
I can't. I cannot. No. Oh, okay. It's spinning.
Connect.
So here's the intersection. Here's Eagle Road. My cursor's up to the north here. You could see how the sidewalk used to travel this way, and now with what has happened with the most recent change in plan is the sidewalk comes into this is the fuel center site. The sidewalk comes into the fuel center site and then crosses here, what looks like it might even be behind the stop line for a vehicle, and then comes up north and then clips the corner of the building envelope proposed for the pads north of Mount Etna Way, west of Eagle Road. Here's the path of travel. I provided this to your team. I just wanted for purposes of example, okay?
No, I appreciate that. None of us are engineers, or at least engineers that do this stuff, so we trust the agency to handle it. But we also recognize that we don't yet have metrics that we can balance against if we make an adjustment to accommodate cars and movement of cars. We don't have metrics that say this is how it will discourage or make more dangerous specific metrics of other modes.
Sure.
Okay, David?
Mr. President, yes, I think just one comment here and then a question. I'll try to be really brief. The concerns about pedestrians and sidewalk locations and crossing locations, those are all well and good, but they're not the issue in front of us here. The question here before us today is about the request for a design modification or a modification from policy. So it would be helpful, I think, if we stick to the issue at hand. And on that point, let me, Mr. Holzer, let me see if I can just summarize where things stand, and you tell me if, in your opinion, this summary is accurate. Initially, ACHD and you, the developer, had a cooperative development agreement under which things were proceeding. Then, for one reason or another, that cooperative development agreement expired. ACHD said, we're going to move forward with the Eagle Road project in any case, and went ahead with these projects, made design changes and so on, and it appears that these design changes are now the sort of thing that causes this problem with the access point along Amity Road. And along the way, there may have been some communication deficiencies, but in any event, that's simply where we are, that ACHD designed and moved forward with a project. It wasn't done under a cooperative development agreement because that agreement had expired, and kind of that's where we are. Is that a fair assessment of what's happened?
I mean, generally, yes.
Okay.
But the missing component here, Commissioner McKinney, with all due respect, is really that we designed the expanded roundabout, and we provided those designs to ACHD, which were ultimately approved. The design we had was accepted by ACHD. When we were told in January 2020, as I mentioned to Commissioner May, that they were proceeding on their own accord because they'd accelerated the project up a year, we took that to mean they've got the plans that we've done, because they made a request at that time for the plans, which they didn't need to make because they owned them under the agreement. We took that to mean that they were moving forward based on the plans we had done and paid for. So that's the only nuance I would add to your summary.
So basically, they didn't say that explicitly. That was your assumption. Is that accurate?
It was, I don't think we assumed. I mean, we had an approved set of plans that were accepted by ACHD, and when they said we're moving forward with the project, the context was we've got these plans done, and they're now executing on them.
But in fact, the design of the project changed a little bit, didn't it?
More than a little bit, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
And we have Mr. Price at the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. For the record, Steve Price, General Counsel. I just kind of wanted to talk about the process today. One is, when staff reviews these applications, they apply policy. And they apply policy in terms, and they make the recommendations based upon compliance with the policy. To the extent that there's any waiver of policy, the applicant is required to comply with the requirements of what's up on the screen, 7104.1. And those 4 bullet points require the applicant to satisfy those. And if they do satisfy that, then the commission would enter specific findings of fact and conclusions just in support of a waiver modification. I'd also like to add that with the expiration of the prior entitlement, as well as the expiration of the CDA, that is most certainly not binding upon the district. That happens a lot. And those entitlements expired as well as the approvals, and nobody can rely upon those going forward. There's a lot of times when the entitlements are given and subsequent to that, ACHD policies change. Well, when the new application comes in, the applicant is not entitled to any applicability of the prior policy sections. They're required to follow the new policy sections. To the extent that Mr. Holzer is raising the issue of prior entitlements as well as the CDA, I believe it's appropriate for the commission to consider that as part of the first bullet point, which would result in extraordinary economic and design hardships, practical difficulties. you can consider that as evidence, but it's not binding upon the commission. You also have to consider any testimony in the record as to the satisfaction of the other three. I believe it's staff's belief that they haven't satisfied all the requirements of this policy. But if the commission makes those findings, we most certainly will carry those out. I thought that would be important for you, but this is what we have to follow today. It doesn't really relate to the design of the intersection itself. It relates to the application that's before us. So I'll stand for any questions. I believe Christie has a rebuttal.
Mr. President, I have a question, Mr.
Yes.
Price. Yes. So, Steve, the applicant has pointed out that there's no change in land use intensification, no change in property, and so to move forward without a waiver actually contradicts another policy, 7205.4.1. Are you saying that policy doesn't apply, or how does that? Because they were able to rely on, and they did not intensify their use. They don't change their use at all. The change that took place was entirely on ACHD's side. And so, are you saying that we don't have to apply that policy?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, I'm not saying that. I was only speaking generally about the process. Whatever is in the staff report in terms of adherence to policy, that is applicable. But all I'm saying is once the entitlement is gone, it is gone. And you can consider it as evidence as to the first bullet point, but that's the extent in which you're not bound by it. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
So the staff report makes no reference to 7205.4.1, which reads, access points shall be reviewed only for a development application that is being considered by the lead land use agency. Approved access points may be relocated and or restricted in the future if the land use intensifies, changes, or the property redevelops. And that's what the applicants brought to our attention, and that is what they've relied upon by not changing or intensifying their use.
Okay, it is not in the staff report, but I'll let Christie address that.
Commissioner Hanson, that particular policy doesn't apply because the prior certificate of zoning application with the city expired. And President Goldthorpe, when the moment is right, there's some additional details I'd like to add.
Yes, please.
So first of all, these plans have not been approved. Mr. Holzer says they have. I have with me the plan review dates for the intersection designs, starting with July of 2017. We did a month turnaround on our review, sent it back to them for modifications. We got it back in 3 months. We reviewed it in a month. 5 months later, we got back their resubmittal. We reviewed it in under a month. 2 months later, we got another resubmittal. And then we heard nothing from them for 13 months. So in August of 2019, we resubmitted plans, or we submitted comments to them regarding modifications to the plans, and we didn't hear anything until September of 2020, so 13 months later. So we do not have approved plans. Furthermore, we did attempt to purchase the plans from the land group. I just found an email in my sent file to Jason Densmer from me. The reason I was involved was because I've worked with Jason on other projects, and my email to him was, do you think that you and your client basically would be willing to entertain a purchase of the plans from ACHD? Because they hadn't been accepted and finalized, we didn't own them because the CDA had already expired, that all of those terms were gone. So I wasn't involved in negotiations or regards to purchasing the plans, but I know that's where I left it with capital projects. The other thing is that maybe there's some misconception about is ECHD didn't start designing the roundabout on our own accord until after the CDA was terminated. So the reason we made the decision to terminate the CDA was because Albertsons had been unresponsive and non-committal for a long time. And what that would result in, as I mentioned earlier, would be that for that intersection to be improved, if we waited for them, kept pushing out an extension, if we went too long, there were going to be other intersections in the area that were ready to move forward, and there would be conflicts with detours, and we didn't know when it could be improved. So ACHD had to make that decision. Well, do we wait and believe them that they're going to do it in another year? Because last year they told us just one more year, and we couldn't do that because that affects our programming and our budgets. So we terminated the CDA because they didn't meet the conditions of the CDA, right? It had nothing to do with how we plan to proceed forward. I know capital projects had several meetings between the time the CDA was terminated and the actual, yeah, we have to do this ourselves. It wasn't, well, let's terminate the CDA so that we can do it. It wasn't fun for our staff to do it, and again, this is capital projects. I mean, we gave them this very short window to start from scratch and design this intersection, partly because we couldn't obtain the plans. You know, as part of the CDA, we would have paid for the plans, the design, and the construction. I mean, that's in the CDA. And had we got through final plans acceptance, you know, that would have all been part of it. But that's not what happened, and that's not the scenario. Regarding put on notice, Albertsons was put on notice September 20th of 2020, and that is when we issued comments on their second final plat extension to the City of Meridian. And within that letter, we notified them that the prior conditions of the CZC that we had approved were no longer valid because that application had expired with the city, and that all conditions and access points would be reevaluated with a future application. And that's where we are here today.
Mr. President? Oh.
I think I had one more thought. Well, I think that was all, but I just felt those were clarifications that needed to be made.
Mary, you have something to say or a question?
Yes, thank you. Christy, I just wanted to say thank you. That was my point of trying to establish the timeline of exactly who knew what, when, what was approved, and your illustration just now in the background was very helpful, so thank you very much for doing that.
Steve.
Mr. President, Commissioners, just for our new commissioners, there were several meetings, and some of which involved the City of Meridian, and workshop. And as a result of that, the Commission directed staff to make design changes to the intersection. So many of the changes that Mr. Holzer has referred to were at the direction of the Commission. It wasn't simply staff, you know, just changing the plans unilaterally. These were all done at by the direction of the Commission after we reviewed them and took their input, as well as the public.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes.
Christy, just because I'm all new in this, did the staff at all use the previously submitted plans? Did you use those plans by Albertsons in any way to help inform the new design?
I'll let Justin answer that.
Thank you.
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, the short answer is no. This design that we are building under construction right now was designed by HDR Engineering, not the land group, and we did not use the plans from the land group to develop the current design.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the commission? Stacy, was there anyone else that wanted to testify on this? Okay, thank you. Well, then we'll go ahead and close this we'll close this now. And it's before the commission for a motion and a discussion. And I think in the last 6 years, this project, in one form or another, or in one portion of the project or another, has wound up resurfacing more than just about any other that I can think of right off the top of my head. And I remember so very clearly from inception until approval back in 2016 and 17, what transpired, why it transpired, to whose benefit, and why. And so I've been very surprised that things haven't worked out according to what was originally agreed on. And that, at least according to what I understand right now, that timelines weren't followed, notice wasn't given, perhaps even, I mean, I'm willing to accept a little bit of responsibility for that, but especially from the applicant. And as Christy mentioned, we have a number of projects in that area that have to be done and that cannot be juggled without some repercussions that personally I, as a commissioner, would rather not have to deal with, because that's more juggling and more real strain on the people who live in that general area for many square miles that we hear complaints about almost daily. And so that's really all the comments that I plan on making about this, and I'd like to turn this over to the commission for any other comments, and then a motion.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I think in considering this situation, I certainly have sympathy for the developer and for the troubles that this involves. But I think when it comes down to it, regardless of what has transpired, we're in a situation where the developer is asking for a waiver that would decrease vehicle safety. And I just can't find myself, I'm not willing to grant a waiver that will make this intersection less safe. So that's, in my mind, that's what it comes down to. The conditions for the waiver, I don't think are met. As I look at those conditions, I don't think we qualify under any of them. You can argue and debate. I don't think we're there, and so that's kind of where I come down. And I recognize this is a difficult situation for the developer, but that I think is where we are.
Thank you. Any other comments? And if not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. President,
Yes.
yeah, I have a different view of the facts. I think we've been presented with evidence that there was an entitlement that was created, and that is evidence that there will be economic hardship to redesign. I think that we should have known exactly how the land was going to be. We did know exactly how the land was planned to be used. And there's now evidence in front of us that there was no change at all to that land use, whether it wasn't going to be intensified or changed. The flow patterns of people coming into and out of by car and other modes. The weakness lies in the fact that we needed to accelerate this. That's not the applicant's issue, it's ours. We need to spend our impact fee funds when we have them, and this project was accelerated by a year. The conflict points with driving, while yes, I think Commissioner McKinney's right, but that's part of the design. We have designed a double lane roundabout that tells people to slow down as you approach and then speed up. So we're giving them false signals. And when you create a design like this, you're basically saying, don't worry about, you don't have to look for other things going on. But suddenly when they get through that and they're speeding up, they have to deal with a crosswalk a little further on down. And actually this might make it safer. But they're not asking for a specific design. I think we can go back to the drawing board and figure out how to make it safer and make people go through this intersection as an urban intersection slowly, because there's a lot of people and a lot of activity that is planned with schools, the YMCA, and this site. I think, in fact, a waiver of this policy will aid in safety of this site and other adjacent properties. And I think that the case has been made that we should waive this policy and go back to the drawing board to figure it out. The concern I have, of course, is, as I asked early on, is once this design is built, finished, and it's unfortunate that it got this far so fast, it's going to be in place for 30 years, 50 years, and it will determine the uses on that property, which we knew what the planned uses were going to be. So it's permanent. And so I think to the extent that we can at least address one little aspect of it, and it's a little one, I think that the applicant has made a case for waiving the policy.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. President, I think when staff, we rely so heavily on staff. Staff does the heavy lifting for us. They've come back to us. They've looked at this project. As you have indicated, this has been multiple years going forward. I definitely have sympathy for the developer. I regret that there has been a lapse in communication, but at the end of the day, staff is recommending to us that we deny the modification request due to safety concerns. And I think Christy gave us the illustration of the concerns that the staff had, and I can't divorce myself from that recommendation and move to support the modification, knowing that we would be putting users in danger. So I am in support of the staff's recommendation.
Is that a formal motion?
I wasn't sure if maybe Commissioner McKinney was going to make a motion.
I can do that if you like.
Could I just say one thing,
Yes.
Mr. President? I really appreciate everybody's testimony here in the staff report and all the work that's been done. And I kind of feel like I'm a hybrid of multiple perspectives here today. And I just wish that I wasn't here when that October meeting happened with the city of Meridian. I've been hearing for quite some time that there was a lot of heartburn about this intersection. And so as somebody that hasn't been in those conversations, it's harder for me to really piece all of the pieces together. But just the lack, I just don't know how safe that driveway would be. But I also just want to voice some concern that, similar to what Commissioner Hansen said, that this project is going to be here for a really long time. And I just really hope that we can just make it really clear when we do communicate and we set those timelines up and we do what we can to minimize those disruptions, and when we do accelerate something for righteous reasons, that we communicate that really clearly. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move that we deny the waiver request, or excuse me, the modification from policy request for the Amity access just west of the Eagle Amity roundabout. But I believe we also need to include there's also a request for waiver on Eagle Road, and that one is recommended for approval of the waiver on Eagle Road. Is that correct, or have I got it wrong? Okay.
So we accept the staff report.
Yes, so I move that we accept the staff report and approve the waiver for the Eagle Road access and deny the waiver for the Amity Road access.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Mr. President, I just want to add on to what Commissioner Pickering said. I think this is unfortunate how this is all kind of this nexus that we have before us here, but lessons learned. And I think going forward, we need to really take a very calculated approach, make sure everybody's on the same page and informed, so we don't end up in a situation like this again.
And I'll give one last and probably repetitive little piece of information on this as part of the discussion. And that is our three of the commissioners, well, Commissioner May understands this because I've said it before, but the two new commissioners might be interested in knowing that this entire development application, this entire process began originally as an item on a consent agenda that was pulled off. I shouldn't laugh because this has really been an amazing process since that happened. Okay, we have a motion and a second. We've had the discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
The motion carries. Thank you all so much. Anyway, that
Thank you,
that
Mr.
concludes our regular agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes.
while we're on the topic, I would like to suggest that at a future meeting that we start the process of evaluating all of those locations in our county where we have these bypass lanes that have created dangers, and that we create an inventory of them and start the process of fixing those. I anticipate this one will be at the very bottom of the list to be fixed in 10 years, but we can at least start making sure that we get rid of dangerous, especially in urban settings, bypass lanes. Thanks.
Thank you. Duly noted. The last thing on our regular agenda is input from anybody in the community who might like to address something. Do we have anyone? We don't? In that case, the meeting is adjourned and we will go into our post-commission agenda. We'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
Reminds me of the good old days when I was a planning and zoning commissioner.
Backed it off of the consent agenda. Started in this one. Communication. Right. There's no way for AC to continue with the development. I could sell the property and themselves, and they're to what you just said. So, are the mics still? Yeah, so I think we. Well, we're back, and we'll go ahead and begin the post-commission agenda with 3 different work sessions. The first one is on our overhead street signs on mast arms. Well, Sean Martin, thank you.
Thank you, President Goldthorpe. My name is Sean Martin. I am Traffic Service Manager here at ACHD. I'm here to present an informational briefing on our overhead street name signs. We have approximately 450 traffic signals in Ada County. Most of those are 4-way intersections, so that equates to about 1,800 overhead street name signs. How they are made, if you go over to our sign shop, we do make our street name signs in our sign shop. So they are made by, the EC film is actually printed on with the street name sign, and then Ron, who's our sign graphic designer, will actually take an X-Acto knife and peel and cut out the street name sign, and then the film is placed over top the sheeting. So what you actually see, when you see the street name sign, what you're actually seeing is the sheeting behind the film. And what we're seeing when you go, we have had some issues with our EC film cracking and turning color. So when you go out there and you see a street name sign failing, what you're seeing is the film itself cracking or turning colors, but not the sheeting behind it. The cost of our overhead street name sign, the way we currently make them, are about $250, which equates to about $11 a square foot. And the life cycle is 7 to 10 years, primarily depending on which way it's facing. The south-facing street name signs don't last as long as ones facing the other directions. So the manual and uniform traffic control devices, or the MUTCD, that is what we go by, as well as the rest of the country, to design our street name signs. What it says, it gives you a minimum letter height that you must use. And it says when you use them, you have to have 12-inch initial uppercase letter and then 9-inch lowercase letters. And it does say that you have to use a combination of the uppercase and lowercase. A rule of thumb for legibility: for every 1-inch letter height that you have, you get approximately 40 feet of visibility. And the other thing the MUTCD states is that the lowercase letters shall be 3/4 the height of whatever your initial uppercase letter is. So remembering that the 4:3 ratio has to be, no matter what you select for the letter height, you have to follow that same ratio.
Excuse me, Mr. President. Sean, can we, just to clarify, did you say that the signs have to be made with uppercase and lowercase?
Correct.
They cannot be all uppercase?
No, at one point we actually did have that because that was allowable. And they have so many studies that they go on. They had a study that actually showed that people, I guess kind of when you quit, the way I quit it too is when you have an email and somebody types all uppercase at you, and I don't want to read that. It's the same with the street name signs. What they found is that for comfortability, people with the uppercase and lowercase is what they prefer.
Okay.
Street name color, the MUTCD says they can either be green, blue, brown, or white. What we have used here at ACHD, and is pretty normal for the rest of the country, is we use our green street name signs for our public intersections. Then our private street intersections, we use blue. We don't use brown or white. Our current design standard, we use a 30-inch sign blank by our normal length, I would say, is about 108 inches. But that length can vary depending on how long the street name sign is, or how long the street name is. Something like a street 28th Street, or for example, or any of the numbered streets, obviously won't take as long of a sign as something like Whitewater Park Boulevard that we've placed here in the auditorium for you. We do follow the MUTCD minimum requirements. So what we design is with a 12-inch initial uppercase letter, which at that 40-to-1 ratio gives us 480 feet of legibility. We have 9-inch lowercase letters. And then the MUTC doesn't exactly speak to what the prefix or suffix letter height should be, but what we've done is have a 6-inch letter height for those block numbers and prefix and suffix. And then as well as our spacing between here and all around the sign is 4 inches. So that's how we get our 30 inches in width. Some alternatives that we could look at, remembering that you have to use the 4:3 ratio. The next step up would be a 13 1/3 uppercase letter height with a 10-inch lowercase, and then that would equate to a 6 2/3 inch block numbers. We would have to increase the sign blank if we were to do that. That is assuming, of course, if we kept with the block numbers. If we didn't have block numbers, we could probably have the same sign blank, but we have always got good feedback on having the block numbers. I think the people like having those, so I wouldn't recommend that we would get rid of those. However, if we did that with only the 40-foot legibility, all we're getting out of increasing that would be about 53 feet of increased legibility, and the cost would be about 6% more at $265. And if we were to replace all 1,800 of our Mast Arm street name signs, that would have a cost of $477,000. And then the maximum, and I wouldn't suggest we go to this, but freeway letter heights, what they use as a minimum are 16-inch uppercase, 12-inch lowercase. Remembering they're designing for something that's 65 miles an hour to 80 miles an hour. For those letter heights, we'd have to go to a 36-inch sign blank. We'd increase the surface area by about 4.5 square feet, and still would only gain 160 foot of increased legibility, reminding that 40-to-1 ratio. The cost would be about $300, which is a 20% increase. And if we were to replace all 1,800 signs, that would be a replacement cost of $540,000. Some concerns we have with increasing the letter height, as you can see by this picture here, on some mast arms we run low on space with having a signal head here, a lane designation sign, and then we also have a right turn on red must yield to U-turn signs. We can be really limited on the amount of space that we have up there. And reminding that, like, in this instance, Franklin is only 8 letters. And when you have something more like Whitewater Park Boulevard, we have limited availability. You would be increasing the surface area, which could perhaps pose a danger when it comes to wind load and cause increased stress on the mast arm or pole. We'd probably want to reach out to a structural engineer just to make sure if we were to go to a bigger sign that the connection is okay. We might have to increase perhaps the bracket size on our mast arm to connect it to, or the bracket on our sign to connect it to the mast arm. And for the increased cost, we really wouldn't get any increased legibility. 160 foot if we went to the 16-inch. And I should go back here, but obviously there are options between the 13.33 and the 16 as well as you could look at, as long as you kept with that same ratio. So our recommendation at this time would be to maintain our current standard of 12-inch uppercase, 9-inch lowercase letter height for overhead street name signs. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes.
Mr. President, I think I might have missed it, but is this replacement just on the ones that need to be replaced, or is it more than just the ones that have had that visual damage?
The cost that I gave you would replace all of them.
Okay.
All 1,800, because eventually all signs would need to be replaced.
Gotcha.
Because due to life, you'd be replacing it 7 to 10 years anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, I think the commission has me to thank for bringing up this issue, because frankly, I'm the one who brought it up, because frankly, I would like to see the signs more legible, and A couple things I didn't realize. I didn't realize that the signs that we have right now actually go with the minimum letter size, the minimum text size. And so, number one, there's no reason to think, we're certainly not going overboard now. We're doing just the bare minimum. But here's a couple of thoughts that I have. Number one, if you look at the cost that let's go back to the options there and the 16-inch uppercase letter option. Total replacement cost of $540,000. That's for all the signs in the entire county. If we made if we changed to number one, simply include these new signs, bigger signs on all new intersection projects or new mast arm replacements or what have you. Every time we do a new one, we change it to a bigger sign. That's as the slide here says, that's a 20% cost increase for these signs, and that's $300. You're talking in a $5 million intersection redesign project, an additional 20%, an additional couple $100 for each of the signs, and then like you say, perhaps some additional hardware costs and so on. That seems to me a trivial cost. But I think to go to a larger sign would make a big difference, and motorists, I think drivers would love it. I know I would. Because one thing I was concerned about, and one thing we haven't talked about here, is how much of sudden braking and traffic safety issues relate to the legibility of signs. As people are approaching an intersection, if the signs are smaller and drivers are unable to read them earlier, you can have last-minute lane changes, sudden braking, and so on. That has I have no doubt that has a safety impact. How much, I can't say. I wish I had that information. But if this agency were to simply go on to number one, as I started to say, new projects get bigger signs, and over the normal course of replacing these signs over the 7 to 10 year lifespan, we simply change to a larger sign size. Over 10 years, $540,000 is then $54,000 per year, which strikes me as something that's not an unreasonable proposition. One additional thought. With the signs that we have now, you mentioned the block numbers, and given the size of those block numbers, you don't see those until you're at the intersection. And I wonder if we have any information. I personally don't use them, and I wonder if we really have good information about, do people really care, people really pay attention to that, especially with GPS these days. It strikes me that what drivers need is just the name of the street. And it strikes me that if we eliminated the block numbers, we could do the larger size, the 16-inch size of lettering, without increasing the signs themselves dramatically in size. And we could get the benefit of that extra visibility without a dramatic increase in cost and potential, like you mentioned, potential load impact on mast arms and so on. I really think that if we increase the size of these signs and the legibility of them, I think the drivers in Ada County would thank us profusely. So that's why I think this is looking at I thought the cost was going to be a lot more than this. Looking at the cost, I think it's entirely reasonable to do something like this that could really increase the usability of our highways. So I'm very much still positive on this sort of proposal. I welcome thoughts from other commissioners.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Well, this is the first that I've ever heard of it being an issue. So I could definitely see the case for an increase in the actual size of the font on faster, wider roads and our arterials, because people are moving faster, so they need to see things from further away. I could see the justification for that, but On the smaller, more local roads, I don't see the justification to increase that size, especially given what you've said, sir, about the real estate on the arms themselves and how limited that can be, especially if those road sign names are extremely long. So that would be my take.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yeah, so I appreciate Commissioner McKinney bringing this forward. This is an area I hadn't looked at, and I would agree with him that just because the national standards are set and we go for the absolute minimum, that we can't do better. Because I think in this case and in many other cases, we can do better for the safety, visibility of all users. So I'd like us to see us move forward with a new sign. I think I agree with Commissioner. I don't think Commissioner McKinney is asking for every sign. It's all on the main arterials and perhaps the collectors. But I would also like us to consider more than the minimum standard on our wayfinding signs for bicyclists, because those are so tiny that the only way they're functional really for cyclists are if you stop, whether as you see approach a sign, stop and then take a look at it. And we're not asking motorists to stop and then look at the sign closely. So I would suggest, I think Commissioner McKinney has a good idea. We should look at follow up on that and also include the bike wayfinding signs and whether we could improve the size and the font and the visibility of those things.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner McKinney, for suggesting this as a topic. It's one that I really am not that versed in, but I certainly wouldn't be averse to using the larger signs going forward and take a look at the the wayfinding signs. We've gotten a lot of feedback on those not being very legible, but I think certainly going forward on the main streets would be advantageous for all users. So thank you. Good information.
Thank you very much, Mary. I think we've got a majority of the commission that would like to see that happen. Don't know that this is a decision item or anything at all, but I'm glad to have this presentation. I have only one question, and that is, does the sign shop still contain the unofficial Museum of Natural History?
Commissioner Gorthorpe, yes, it does.
All right. Then you guys should all go out there and see if the museum and how the signs are made. You think I'm kidding, don't you?
No, I don't. I never assume that you're kidding.
No, Mr. President, though, really quick before we wrap up on this one, I was able to actually have a tour of your facility and how you print the signs, and I was really impressed. I did that, I think, about 2 years ago. So, I mean, to Commissioner McKinney's point about the fiscal piece, I mean, you all have been able to be really efficient since you moved over from your prior ways that you built the signs to now. So it'd be really curious to know the cost benefit and how much you've saved since you've switched over, and potentially use that as a justification to replace all of them.
Okay. Well, however we have to arrive at a decision on this, I assume it's going to be brought back to us one of these days sooner than later.
Yeah, Mr. President, if I may, I wonder if then I guess what we're asking for is for the staff to come back with a specific proposal for our consideration for this policy, and then it would have to, of course, be incorporated into the budget and so on. So what would be the process from this point?
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, I have your direction and from an administrative part, and we'll be back to you shortly for a formal decision on your part.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, number 2 item on the work session is a programming target review on our integrated 5-year work plan for 2022 through 2026. And Christy Inselman will be taking care of that. Nice to see you, Christy.
I see you too. Gotta grab it. The commission is fortunate to get the 2 amazing Christies today. wait, never mind. I think I know. Okay. So good afternoon, Mr. President, Commissioners. For the record, Christy Enselman, Planning and Programming Department. To begin with, I'd just like to review with the Commission where we're currently at in the process for the annual update to the Integrated 5-Year Work Plan and where we're headed. So today's presentation is on the programming targets, and this will be the third work session with the Commission. The next work session will be on April 7th on project prioritization. The purpose of today's presentation is to review with the Commission the capital allocation methodology. Staff will be reviewing the current programming targets as well as any changes, and we're also asking for your consideration regarding current challenges in meeting those targets. I'll get into more of that as we go along. So this slide shows how the Commission directed allocation methodology is broken out. First is to meet ACHG's programming obligations. These include ADA and environmental compliance that are critical programming compliance items which are integrated into each and every ACHG project. The vehicle registration fee ballot commitments, otherwise known as VRF, which are the safe routes to school and congestion relief, as well as the obligation to match impact fee collections with required general funds. And I'll go into that more later. The second category is the methodology. The methodology is a primary focus of safety and maintenance. These include signals, crossings, safety projects with documented needs, as well as our asset management, which is maintaining our existing infrastructure. These include our capital maintenance and bridges program. And then finally, we have the secondary focus, which is system enhancements. These include the projects identified through the adopted neighborhood plans, the bike master plan, and community projects that are not funded through the VRF. And then we have the non-impact fee eligible capital improvement plan projects. At a recent Commission meeting, the question came up regarding roadway costs and what percentage is allocated to bike and ped facilities. So we thought this would be a good time to show how that breakdown works. This is a portion of 10-mile roadway project from Ustick to McMillan that is currently completed. In the 5-year work plan, we've historically and will continue to report this is a single project, as depicted by the image on the left. It's simpler for the public to see the project as a whole in one place. However, we're able to account for the different cost components while still reporting as a single project, which is represented by the image on the right. Through this accounting, we can now show the complete investment picture for ACHD. The Commission adopted the Complete Streets policy, which creates a holistic view of what a project is. In this example, we rebuilt the existing roadway, which is the black shape there in the middle. We widened the pavement, which is an impact fee eligible portion, and that's the yellow. We improved 2 bridges. Those are also impact fee eligible, which are the blue triangles you see on the screen. We added bike lanes and sidewalk, which are the darker red and green, and we also improved pedestrian ramps to meet ADA standards and added an enhanced pedestrian crossing in the lighter red and green. As we look at projects in this way and build those into the program, we end up with a complete program of projects. For this specific example, 15% of the project cost was for bike and ped enhancements. This is an overall view of the breakdown of program cost for the 5-year work plan. ACHG's primary expense over the next 5 years is maintenance, and this will continue to grow as the system grows. When taking that aspect out, ACHG's investment in system enhancements is fairly balanced. This graph takes into account the investment on bike and ped infrastructure we make with complete street, road, and intersection projects. And the percentages on this graph are based on the 21-25 adopted integrated 5-year work plan and include all programs regardless of funding type. So now we move into the programming targets. The targets set the funding goals for the multitude of programs within the integrated 5-year work plan. The commission reviews the funding targets during the annual update, which is today's work session. Programming targets are considered met when the 5-year programming is at or above the 5 years of annual targets. Staff will program the integrated 5-year work plan to the identified target based on the capital allocation methodology priorities. This slide represents the funding targets of each of the capital allocation methodology groupings. The numbering on the left side of each program represents the level within that methodology. The target numbers on this slide represent, again, the 21-25 adopted integrated 5-year work plan. When programming to these targets, we start at the top tier of the methodology and continue to programming as funding is available. So today we will be reviewing a few specific programs and their targets. They include the Bridge Maintenance Program, the CIP update and impact fees, and review of the community programs funding. So our minor bridge maintenance target is currently at $3.5 million per year. So the adjusted target would increase this to $4 million per year to address our current backlog.
Christy, what would be considered a minor bridge maintenance?
A minor bridge. So if it's a major bridge, those are typically located on our arterial roadway and intersection projects, and pretty much anything else is a minor bridge.
Thank you.
So the Capital Improvement Plan, otherwise known as the CIP, is one of our funding obligations, which is in the first tier of the capital allocation methodology. The 2020 Capital Improvement Plan was adopted by the Commission on August 19th of 2020. It is a 20-year document that identifies the forecasted needs for the arterial networks of roads and intersections. The CIP is then reviewed every 4 years, and we expect them to change. An outcome of that update was the needs increased for our arterial roads and intersections. Previously, the annual target was $36.7 million. With the commission-approved CIP, the annual target will increase to $47.8 million annually. It should also be noted that the impact fee program balance is currently at $3.5 million. ACHC cannot expend impact fees without allocating general funds for the non-impact fee eligible portion of a project, which is, in a nutshell, we're taking in more than we are spending. And then community programs, this is just a review of what our current community programs funding targets are. As a reminder, the safe sidewalks and safe routes to school are part of the funding obligations. We're currently targeting $1.6 million for safe sidewalks, which is the maximum with existing staffing. The VRF ballot commitment is targeted at $16.5 million for the 5 years. Our core community programs is a secondary focus item, and the target is a minimum of 5% of the overall capital budget with a 5-year target of $15.3 million. So these are the adjusted targets that will be used to program the 22-26 integrated 5-year work plan. The Bridges program, as stated before, will increase from $3.5 million to $4.4 million annually with a 5-year target of $20 million. And the CIP will increase from $36.7 million to $47.8 million annually with a 5-year target of $239 million. These targets are based on the adopted plan, which are CIP, our strategic plan, capital allocation methodology. And then the next steps, where we're at. So staff will be back before the commission on April 7th with a project prioritization work session, and I will stand for any questions.
I have one.
Only one?
Christy, thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
And this question is one that I kind of ask in one form or another regularly since fall of last year. And that is, we have scheduled yet the CIP conversation for March, Director. Okay, I would ask you to kind of keep this a little bit fluid until after that particular commission meeting, because the percentages and dollar amounts might change.
And just as a reminder, Mr. President, these are targets.
Yes.
Once
yes.
we get into the programming, we will come back to you again with initial drafts and have some funding and revenue conversations in the future. This is just talking about the target we're trying to hit.
Thanks for that reminder.
Yes.
Christy, I have a question about, just generally speaking, how do we reconcile these targets for this, next 5-year work plan with the general? I mean, we're growing rapidly. We're expanding our roadway and our infrastructure to meet the demand, but at some point we're gonna fill up. So I'm just curious, like, how do we, like, are these targets? Are they adjustable in light of kind of the bigger 20-year plan, I would say, of terms of capacity and building the infrastructure as big as we want to? In meeting with Gary and Director Wong and a few others, there's this other plan of widening certain roads, and that's kind of it for a while. I'm just curious if these targets and this breakdown of funds is also compatible with those longer range plans.
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, yes. All of our adopted plans work very cohesively when it comes to programming the 5-year work plan. So we have our ultimate long range, the master street map, and that feeds into our capital improvement plan, which is our 20-year plan, which informs our 5-year work plan. It tells us the forecasted needs for our infrastructure and which ones are coming up at the need is the greatest. So he's right in the way. It feeds into that, and it helps inform our decision on when we're choosing which projects to move into the 5-year work plan. So yes, they all work together.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I have a question, Christy. I just want to make sure I understood. You had that pie chart a few slides back.
Mm-hmm.
Was that pie chart, is that showing the entire, our total programmed investment for the next 5 years? 21% of ACHD's entire 5-year work plan budget is directed toward bicycle and pedestrian enhancements.
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, so this pie chart is based on the 21-25 adopted plan. But I don't anticipate that those percentages will change significantly with the 22-26 once we get into that program up. But yes, 21% of all programs in the integrated 5-year work plan go to bike and pedestrian enhancements. Even some of our maintenance projects with our new direction, we're going out to widen or replace the asphalt, there may be a missing sidewalk connection. That also goes into that 21%. So yes.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, because that's the sort of question I was asking a week or so ago when we were talking about these issues, and that's frankly, that's shocking to me that it's 21%. That's a big chunk. So anyway, thank you for your report.
Anything else, Jim, Mary? I don't have anything.
Yeah, Mr. President.
Yes.
Yeah, just clarify, I appreciate Commissioner McKinney's comment, but in fact, when a development comes in and they give us a plan, we expect them to be 50-50. In fact, you could argue that they put in more bicycle and pedestrian facilities because you have two sides of the sidewalk and we're counting the two sides. I'm not sure if that's the case. And a road. So in fact, it's pretty consistent to do for a new development 50-50. We'll eventually build out this entire county, and we'll have to go back and figure out all the gaps. And we have tolerated in history gaps for people to walk and bike. We have tolerated non-accessible facilities for people with disabilities, but we have not tolerated not having a road. So the connection to drive has always been met first. Mr. President, I would suggest this is a really good time to take a look and reframe our priorities, because to be truly integrated, we should integrate all of them and not separate out the impact fee eligible projects, which go in first, and then we take off the top the property tax that has to be used to match it, and then we treat community programs as secondary. I think we have to rethink this, not as the source of funds, but as to the value to the taxpayer. And I think we have to set those values and say, these projects are going to, what are going to return value to the tax base. We're so dependent on property taxes, we have to take that as consideration. These projects prioritize safety for all modes of travel. These projects prioritize connectivity. And we talk about these, but they're not included. Safety comes in after we've already talked about ADA, environmental, VRF, and then matching impact fees. So I think we need to rearrange this so that we are still getting at the prioritization of safety for all modes, connectivity for all modes, and tied into return of value is those kind of investments that don't require too much additional maintenance obligations, because we have to realize everything we build, we have to maintain. And so if we are enhancing something that doesn't require a lot of new maintenance, that's actually better than if we just build things that require a huge amount of maintenance obligation. So I would suggest that we prioritize projects that way. And then some of those will be big capital projects that are impact fee eligible, but they're in the list. And then we would use the match to that. So we know where they fit in the priority list. And I know the reason why we keep pushing CIP, capital improvement projects, to the top is because we have an impact fee and we don't have a negative balance. We have a positive balance. So we have to spend it. Otherwise, we can't justify collecting those fees. That's kind of backwards, because what we should do is be spending in order to return value and set these criteria for the value. So we are now at a point, now that we have a growing balance in our impact fee on the positive side, that does not mean we should build something that might be less important than something else that is not impact fee eligible. So I would ask the Commission to truly set an integrated, so it's truly integrated, prioritization list that prioritizes safety, connectivity, return of value to the taxpayer, and maintenance obligations. The comment, of course, we have an obligation. We do indeed, and it's integrated into this. What the voters passed the vehicle fee registration. School safety, that's part of safety, and connectivity. That's really critical. And so that already incorporates that. We, of course, unfortunately used the language congestion relief in that. Really, it should be congestion mitigation, and you mitigate through connectivity mostly and signals, traffic signals. Congestion is created by development patterns and the lack of connectivity, and it's not consistent throughout. So congestion occurs in some places and not in other places. So the notion of relief actually doesn't help, and it helps to reinforce a false impression to the taxpayers that they're going to get relief. They're not. If we continue development patterns as we have, and the minimal level of connectivity and the minimal level of transportation choices, there'll be congestion. There'll be more congestion with each new development. And the other is, I think it's important that we also refer to facilities as facilities. They're facilities. They're not necessarily enhancements unless they return value. So I would argue for language that talks about, car facilities, bicycle facilities, pedestrian facilities. When they're connected and they function well, then they return value. You can call them whatever you want, but at the point in which we're constructing them, I think we just call them facilities, because, well, you call these bicycle and pedestrian facilities on the sides of roadways enhancements. They really don't, because they're not connected, they're not used, they may not be safe until there's additional investment. So even calling them an enhancement is not an accurate characterization. I think we have to call them just a facility, count them as a facility, and then when they are connected and safe and they return value because people use them, then you can call them an enhancement at that point. But at this point, I think it's really important that we not create the false impression that these are truly enhancements. Let's figure out the measurement of whether it enhances or doesn't enhance a particular neighborhood or business climate is based upon a return of that investment and how people use it. and it's not on the front end necessarily. As we first build a piece of it, it comes on the back end. So I would argue that we need to take all these priorities, they're good, and just reframe them. And most importantly, that we list our priorities together, everything, all projects, whether they are on the CIP or whether they're not. They're all on a priority list, and then we evaluate them the same way. We shouldn't be spending the taxpayers' money and obligating them to long-term permanent maintenance obligations based upon the sources of funds from which they come. It should be based upon the return to which they provide the taxpayers.
Thanks, Jim. Semantics aside, I think the last few years we've made great strides in approaching some of what you're saying, at least, in filling the 400 and some odd miles of gaps that we have in this county for sidewalks, curbs and gutters, bicycle facilities, and also in changing policy to where we're going to be doing more multi-use pathways, providing for some forms of transit facilities on some arterials. I think we're doing that, and in light of the fact that we're going to be addressing the CIP again very quickly, and then the 5-year work plan again, I think that we're all going to see that that we have a better balance. Just my comment.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think we now need to catch up in the way we frame it and describe it so that we're a modern urban area in the way we describe this as a return.
I just don't want to do anything that's going to make it so that other commissions in the future feel like their hands are tied.
Mr. President, I have
Yes.
a rebuttal comment, I should say. Well, on the campaign trail and talking to people about the issues that they cared about, oftentimes people did get caught up in what Commissioner Hansen is saying. We need this relief, this congestion relief. We need this thing. And as we know, it creates induced demand once we do widen it. So I think the way that we frame, similarly to what he's saying, congestion relief doesn't really tell the whole story as accurately as it probably could, to go along with being able to explain to the public what this process actually looks like, and that there might be some relief, but temporarily, right? It's totally a long game in making sure that we have all modes. We're working with our land use partners to understand the decisions that they make impact the transportation system. So I think that to that point, it can get confusing for a lot of our everyday folks that want to know how to impact and make their communities safer and more accessible.
Okay, any questions, more questions or comments? And Christy, thank you so much. Our final item on our post-commission agenda has to do with the Regional Park and Ride Study Overview, and Tessa Grieger is going to give that presentation to us. She's our commuter ride manager.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you so much for all your time today. My name is Tessa Grieger, and I manage the Commuter Ride Program. So today I'm going to provide a brief overview of the Compass Regional Park and Ride Study, which was recently completed. The agenda packets include a link to the full study, as well as a link to a one-page overview. Both of these are also included in Commuter Ride's website, as well as Compass's website. So at a high level, the study demonstrates that we have a good foundation of a park and ride system in place today, supported by multiple agencies as well as multiple businesses. And it serves commuters across modes. Yet there is clear opportunity.
Uh-oh.
Fortunately, we're still on slide 1, so.
Because we're just looking at Commissioner Hansen. Thank you, Tessa.
Oh, there he goes.
Oh, God.
Okay, I apologize for that. So at a high level, the study demonstrates that we have a good foundation for a park and ride system in place today. Again, this is supported by multiple agencies throughout the region as well as multiple businesses, and it serves commuters across modes. Yet, the study also demonstrates that there's clear opportunity for formalizing the existing system and expanding in future alignment with regional plans and transit expansion plans. In order to truly realize the full potential that a park and ride system can have in terms of congestion mitigation as well as reducing single occupant vehicle trips throughout our region. The study was initiated last year. It's led by Compass, supported by ACHD Commuter Ride, as we have a shared desire to look at evaluating the current system and improving the efficacy, and a shared interest in advancing the park and ride network in alignment with regional plans and projects. In addition to Compass and Commuter Ride, Valley Regional Transit, FHWA Idaho, and ITD were part of the core project management team. These are also agencies that have some control over the park and ride system today. Either they own or manage or provide funding to support the system. In addition to the partner agencies, the study included work sessions with select stakeholders, really to provide input from an employer or a user perspective. Further, the study was shaped and vetted through input from the Compass Public Transportation Work Group as well as the Regional Transportation Advisory Committee. These are really the agencies or the groups that have representation from jurisdictions throughout the Compass planning area and really help to shape the recommendations throughout the plan. The study is intended to advance the goals and recommendations of various regional plans and initiatives already underway, including ACHD's plans, as well as Compass's regional long-range transportation plan, Communities in Motion. In addition, it's intended to advance the recommendations of Valley Regional Transit's Valley Connect 2.0 transit system plan, as well as plans that are currently underway looking at high-capacity transit options for the Treasure Valley. The study recommendations will ultimately feed into the Compass Communities in Motion 2050 plan, which is currently in development and planned for later adoption in 2022. The document is intended to be a living resource, primarily used internally to guide decision planning and investment decisions by Compass, as well as ACHD and other regional agencies. The intent is that this document will be refined over time, so you'll see, and I'll talk about here in a minute, there is recommended methodology for looking at different park and ride locations in the Treasure Valley. That is intended to be updated and refined with partner agencies over time. The first part of the study, both in terms of how it's organized, but also the process that was followed, really sets the foundation. So this is starting to look at an analysis of our current system. What's out there today and how does it actually function and work for commuters throughout the Treasure Valley. In addition, it looks at growth patterns, both from an employment and population standpoint, using Compass's regional growth model, and then identifies a few best practices from other communities that are also managing park and ride systems throughout the country. And then the second part of the study looks at the future. So this is starting to look at different typologies for how we might look at our park and ride system down the road, as well as providing some recommendations or a methodology for how we might site and invest and then ultimately prioritize park and ride enhancements or new park and ride locations in the future. The existing park and ride system provides parking for access to Valley Regional Transit bus routes, van pool, as well as carpooling. And that access varies depending on the location of the facility and the context of that facility. The way we currently look at our park and ride system is by defining it as formal versus informal facilities. So a formal park and ride refers to park and rides that are owned, leased, or managed by a transportation agency. So examples of this include 10 Mile, which there's a picture of on the slide, as well as College of Western Idaho Park and Ride, Happy Day Transit Center, Elder Street Park and Ride in Boise. Informal park and rides, which comprise about 2/3 of the system today, at least in terms of what was looked at for this study. These are park and rides that are primarily serving a different purpose, where there may be an agreement set up, largely agreements that have been established through commuter ride to utilize a portion of their parking lot. So this might be a partner business to support ride sharing, primarily van pool operations. So ACHD currently owns 5 park and ride systems, park and ride lots in Meridian and Eagle. The 10-mile park and ride is our largest facility. It's also our most heavily utilized facility today. The park and rides that exist under ACHD's jurisdiction, those were developed largely through remnant parcels after ACHD projects or ITD projects. So the study did an evaluation of the system, and some general takeaways from that study were that there is a general lack of connectivity to first mile and last mile connections, as well as to fixed route transit services. The study found that there's a lack of consistent signage as well as maintenance standards across the system, and this is largely due to what I spoke about previously in terms of the system being largely informal and set up on an ad hoc basis to serve van pool routes. On a positive note, the study did find that we have additional capacity throughout the system to support park and ride users moving forward. This provides us with an opportunity to better leverage these assets and invest in priority locations moving forward. The analysis of best practices identified a variety of different ways other communities are developing, marketing, funding, and then ultimately improving the efficacy of park and ride systems. And this is everything from providing standard facilities such as signage, transit shelters, bike facilities, to providing wayfinding, helping people navigate to and from the system. In addition, it looked at first mile, last mile connections. So some of those recommendations that were identified in the study look at highlighting certain things as, as a priority, being providing connections to high quality bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, looking at first mile, last mile solutions in terms of providing micromobility solutions, bike share, scooter share, things like that. And then the best practices also looked at different ways for managing park and ride systems throughout a larger region, looking at different opportunities for partner coordination. So in the future, the study recommends that park and rides be classified according to typologies versus how we're looking at it today in terms of the informal, formal nature. So these typologies would be based on a variety of factors, really looking at the context and the location of the potential park and ride facility, looking at things such as population and employment density, distance from the central business district, and then access to that park and ride facility from a variety of different modes. The recommended typologies range from high density or a mobility hub, and this really goes beyond your traditional park and ride model where you're focusing on bringing together a variety of different services, transportation services and modes, and prioritizing connections to bicycling and walking and high capacity transit over access from single occupant vehicle trips. And then the next level is looking at your medium density. These may be more suburban in nature, which would provide a modest amount of parking, but still focus on those multimodal access points and connections. And then on the other end is your low density typology. So these are going to be, tend to be on the fringe. A number of our park and ride facilities today would fall into the low density category. In the near future, these would likely remain more car dependent, larger facilities to support and capture trips from a broader range in more rural areas. Regardless of the typology that the park and ride facility falls into or the location, there are recommended standards that should be pursued for all park and ride moving forward. So this includes things looking at pavement quality, ensuring that the park and rides are paved as well as striped, providing some basic features such as lighting and signage, ensuring that they are ADA compliant, and then providing some general information for users to be able to access nearby transit routes, information for bike routes and things like that. In looking at ACHD's 5 park and rides, we are doing very well in terms of providing some of these basic features. Our park and ride lots have lighting, they have bike lockers, signage, they are all paved and striped, and have to some degree some landscaping. So the system today has a pretty strong foundation of facilities throughout the Treasure Valley. However, these are informal, as I've discussed. With that in mind, the study looked at identifying broad areas where we may want to consider formalizing some of these lots in the future in alignment with plans to expand the public transportation system and also to better serve first and last mile connections and van pool or carpool options in the future. So these were looked at for the 2 transit scenarios that are laid out in the Valley Connect 2.0 plan. So looking at this from an intermediate standpoint, and then also looking at it from the growth scenario where the transit system would expand significantly over the next 20 or so years. Some of the recommended areas to consider in terms of formalizing lots that we may have in the existing system today include looking in Nampa, Meridian, Cuna, Emmett, and then some of the sub areas or neighborhoods of Boise such as Southeast, Southwest, and near the airport. For this study, the new park and ride lots are recommended more on the periphery. This is looking at where there's potential to capture trips that may be more than 40 minutes in duration to a central business district. This includes areas of north and south rural Canyon County where transit service in the future may terminate or where they could function as carpool or van pool starting points. The study includes a methodology for evaluating potential future investments, whether it's expanding or enhancing the system or potentially adding new park and ride facilities down the road. This framework includes multiple criteria which are listed on the slide that should be considered before determining whether or not to invest in a park and ride location. So some of the criteria includes location and visibility. Does it have access to transit today? Would it have access to transit in the future? What is the connectivity to first mile, last mile connections, bicycle and pedestrian paths, and high quality facilities? What's the surrounding context in terms of population and employment density, things like that. Ultimately, the methodology that's provided is looked at in terms of the different typologies that I spoke about previously and then weighted accordingly. So some of the typologies may have a higher weight for certain types of amenities or criteria that would and should be considered in the future. The recommended next steps are structured in terms of near term, so looking out over the next couple years, and then long term over the next 5 to 20 years. Within the next couple years, the recommendations are to continue to formalize and collect data across the system with agency partners, continue to identify those opportunities to standardize and move forward with some standardization of the facilities, and then really focusing on partnership development, so working with local jurisdictions as well as agency partners involved in owning and managing park and rides to identify opportunities for formalizing the system and potentially new locations in the future. And then there's a big opportunity in terms of marketing and promotion. So currently our park and rides vary in terms of utilization, but there is an opportunity for us to consider different ways for how we can let users know that these are there and the options that they have in terms of connectivity and transit and van pool services. And then one of the next steps in the near term that Compass will be leading is developing a system management team. So this will involve key stakeholders that were involved in shaping this plan or this study to help ensure consistency and move some of these recommendations forward. In the long term, the focus is on formalizing and expanding. So this is where we're starting to look at some of those key locations that have been identified as opportunities for formal facilities, expanding those potentially, and then starting to look at that strategic expansion into new areas. And then this is just talking more specifically about some of the next steps, or the steps we're pursuing currently as ACHD and as ACHD commuter ride, which are in alignment with the recommendations from the study. So we are conducting data collection of our existing park and ride lots. We are pursuing different safety and signage upgrades, including looking at options for providing video surveillance technology at some of the lots, working on different options for marketing and promotion. And then we are formalizing some of our park and ride agreements in key areas, and this is something that the commission will likely be seeing in the near future, looking at the city of Kuna, looking at Mountain Home, and the city of Boise as well. And then last but not least, we are continuing to coordinate with agency partners, of course, through the follow-up from this study, as well as with our partners across ACHD to identify future funding opportunities, future locations where park and rides may make sense, and ways to pursue those. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that presentation and the study. And I'm really excited that the key takeaways, are surrounded around partnerships and how can we enhance the current foundation that y'all have built over the last few years, which I think is really exciting. I'm just curious, what does data collection actually look like in terms of what will you be collecting and how will you be collecting it?
Great question, Commissioner Pickering. Thank you. So currently, some of the data that we are looking at, so our operations team is going out and visiting our park and rides a couple times a month and looking at counts, so utilization, how many cars are parked in the parking facilities, what is the condition, are there things that need to be maintained in terms of signs, how are the bike lockers doing, are they being used, is there trash, things like that, just general maintenance observations, and then following up to ensure that our park and ride facilities are at the highest standard that they can be at. In the future, and recommendations from this study specifically look at expanding that data collection across our agency partners, ensuring that we're following a consistent methodology, and then setting up benchmarks so we know what success looks like. So when we're talking about utilization, what does a successful park and ride look like? And what are some opportunities if we're not meeting those benchmarks to be able to pursue different strategies in order to achieve those?
And Tessa, I think that'll be really helpful because if, and this is just my, take it for what it's worth, my opinion, it's hard to even know that they exist because they're informal. And so I think getting those counts now, and once you decide to make certain park and rides more formal, I think it'd be great to know the data around that to make sure it was a justified expense and that it actually had the outcome that we were hoping for. And then I see, could you go back a couple slides with the table in terms of the different sites in the cities? So could you explain this a little bit more? So is that what you hope to have enhanced park and ride lots, or that's what currently exists in those areas?
Another great question. Thank you, Commissioner Pickering. So the enhancement, so this is looking at areas where today we have park and ride facilities that may be in that informal category.
Okay.
And areas where the transit system may be expanding or currently exist. And then also looking at growth patterns and coming up with recommendations for where we may want to target those enhancements. So converting potentially an informal facility to a more formalized park and ride, either in that location or in a different location within that general target area.
Perfect. And I'm really excited to see rural Canyon County, Notice, Melba, Parma, Southern Canyon County, Emmett, a lot of these other communities that really are, a lot of folks are moving out there from Ada and Canyon County for affordable housing, and they have to still commute into Boise for those jobs. And so I'm really excited to see that, and I'm really curious, are there other partnership opportunities that you think should be on the horizon that we should be mindful of and leverage our agency to help foster those partnerships?
Commissioner Pickering, great question. I think the framework for the study and the partners that were involved sets a good standard or framework moving forward for jurisdictions and different agencies that should be involved in these discussions moving forward. So the core project team, where we're looking at Valley Regional Transit, ITD, FHWA, and Compass, helping to convene that group as a regional transportation agency. In addition, I think, the recommendation here in the study and what we're pursuing at Commuter Ride is really looking at how can we identify other partnership opportunities with the local jurisdictions. Now, the local jurisdictions are involved in shaping the recommendations both from this study and shaping the future transportation system through different boards and work groups that are developed through Compass as well as Valley Regional Transit. So I think the partners are there, and it's continuing to foster those relationships and identify where different planning efforts may be taking place. For example, in Canyon County, a comprehensive plan update, looking at ensuring that park and rides are a key component to those considerations.
Perfect, thank you. And I really appreciated that there were such diverse membership. There was a diverse representation of different voices and jurisdictions on that group, and particularly Mountain Home. I have a loving relationship with that town, and yeah, they're very impactful to this type of work. But I was curious, with the chamber, there's no chambers of commerce, and so I was wondering, is that the next iteration with the studies? Do we then go into more business partners to demonstrate the value case of this?
I think that's a great recommendation. Currently, we do have partnerships with a number of businesses to support, again, the informal lots, and I think that's a great stepping stone for us to continue those conversations with key businesses. And that was something that was a priority for the stakeholder working group involved in this study. So looking at St. Luke's and Albertsons and different businesses that may play a key role in not only van pool or transit, but potentially providing space or recommendations for park and ride lots in the future. And I think chambers of commerce are certainly organizations that would be really strong partners to have those conversations with as well.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
I would bring up right now that we have a team at Commuter Ride that goes out there to develop those private partnerships. And Kathleen, are you still a part of that? Okay. Yeah. You have Simplot yet? All right. That was a hard one. No, those private partnerships are growing great guns. I'll tell you who the private partner, I think, if it ever comes to the table, would make all of this explode, and that would be the railroad. But I'm not holding my breath yet. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I have some comments. Tessa, thank you for your presentation. One thing I noticed, I went through this Compass study, and something kind of jumped out at me. It's on page 76 of our agenda packet. It looks like it's page 30 of the Compass study, page 6 of the American Communities Survey data. So I don't know which page number applies. It's a little bit confusing. But in any case, there was a table that jumped out to me, and I don't know if we can bring that up. But it's table 1.2-3 from that study, which shows Ada County commuting choices. And it shows data from 2010, 2015, and 2018. And it looks like the source is the U.S. Census Bureau. But it kind of caught my eye because we're talking here about public transit. And this table shows that from 2010 to 2018, for Ada County commuting choices, public transit's choice level went from 1% down to 0%, which I assume means it's less than 0.5%. So 0.5% in 2018, 0.5% of or less of Ada County commuters chose to use public transit. And so I look at that, yeah, I think it's page, if we can get to page 30, I think, the right page for,
There we are.
there we go up, yeah, here we are. That's Canyon County, go up one page ahead before, there you go, Ada County. Yeah, if we can look at that, from 2010 to 2018, the public transit line goes from 1% to 0%. And that struck me as we talk about how, as we talk about expanding. That's, you know, that just kind of struck me as something curious in any event, that public transit as a choice is going down, and yet we're talking about expanding the system. And so that's kind of my, it's not really a question, it's kind of a comment. But let me make another comment, and this ties back into the 5-year work plan discussion we had a few minutes ago. Because if you also look, this chart shows walking and biking. Now this is just talking about commuting, so this isn't talking about, you know, recreational use for walking and biking or shopping or other uses. But walking and biking, each of those went down also in that same interval. Walking went from 2% down to 1%, and biking from 3% down to 2%. And yet, as we saw just a few minutes ago, ACHD is dedicating 21% of its budget to bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and only 30% to vehicle capacity. And I have to admit that this is one area where maybe I disagree a bit with Commissioner Hansen, because I don't think there's any way that anyone could say we are underfunding bicycle and pedestrian facilities. In fact, if anything, the opposite could be said, because if we need a change in priorities, it strikes me that the evidence here shows that any change in priorities ought to favor increasing vehicle capacity, not the other way around. Because contrary to the statement that widening roads creates demand, it doesn't. Developing property does, building new homes does. That's what creates demand. Widening the roads simply reroutes the demand to different locations. If you have a 4-lane road instead of a 2-lane road, more of the traffic will be diverted there. The demand is there, and the demand is going to increase, continue to increase. And if we're only spending, if we're spending 21% of our budget on bike and pedestrian facilities and only 30% on increasing vehicle capacity, when 98% of all the usage is vehicle, or all the demand in any case is vehicle, that strikes me as, in any event, one aspect, one area where we need to really consider our priorities, not the other way around. I don't think anyone could make a reasonable argument that we're spending too little on bicycle and pedestrian facilities. If anything, the opposite is true.
Okay, thank you. And before we open up a can of worms and argue about that, I'm going to utilize my authority as the referee here and say we're not going to do that. Tessa, this is your first presentation to us, isn't it?
It is.
Anybody tell you what I was likely to do?
President Goldthorpe, can I thank?
Just a second, I'm going to score Tessa's presentation first. You'll have to ask somebody what that means.
Swimming, yes.
Okay, Jim.
All right. Thanks, Tessa. I know you're our transit director, and I really appreciate the work that our commuter ride does, because you do use data and you understand how to use the existing infrastructure and analyze the work based on the demand, the transportation demand, and manage it. I appreciate that you also refer to it. It's a piece. It doesn't address all transit needs. It is a piece. It's really important, especially the further out you go from more dense areas to less dense areas. It's so critical. And the way it works is with other modes of transit, and so well to fully integrate it. We built out a lot of roads, so we just want to make sure that it's used and move people, because ultimately people go to work. Cars don't show up and punch a time clock. People do. The issue with that, you're constantly moving. I understand that. The flexibility that's critical as the van pool provides services to different communities. There's two things. One is with the recognition that north of the river, we really have one major arterial, and that's State Street, and we're moving towards a high-capacity transit. To think about how commuter ride provides that last several miles to get to the hub. Because ultimately, that's how people are going to use it. They're going to have to figure out if they're close, they can walk there. But if they're not, they need to get there first. And building a gigantic parking lot at a transit station on State Street is just not going to work. So people are going to get there by changing modes through vans, and that's a really important role we play to help people get from there up to wherever they live beyond a mile. And that's really critical, and the kind of work you're doing helps to get that. The further out you go, as development has happened and people recognize it's a long haul, they still have to go on arterials and to get to work, is to recognize working with churches, because they tend to have large parking lots that aren't used as much on weekdays, and there's a great opportunity there during the week, on the weekdays. And so I like to see those public-private partnerships that benefits everybody, and everybody knows where a good place is, safe place to leave their car, and then they can take the 10 miles or whatever the van driving is. And of course, I won't argue with Commissioner McKinney. I appreciate that. For 50 years, we've built for cars, and we've got a lot of them, and now we're maintaining. We're maintaining, so that 50+% of our maintenance budget is really about maintaining that infrastructure. And so it's good that, because we can't widen in most places, we're constrained, to be able to put van pools and other forms of transit on there. So we are representing the taxpayer as well, and I really appreciate the kind of data-driven work that you do at Commuter Ride.
All right.
Mr. President, I just wanted to squeeze in and say thank you to Tessa. Great job. Lots of good information.
You betcha, and that's for sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seeing as that there isn't any other questions or comments about this, I will declare this meeting closed.